lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, guys, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 251 of Sports Cards Live. It's Saturday night, December the 14th, 2024. My name is Jeremy Lee. Everybody, quick reminder announcement. No Fanatics Collect hockey auction show tomorrow night, but the Fanatics Premier Auction with Adam Gray will be coming live this coming Thursday. Want to thank sponsors. Filth Bomb Breaks offers live box and case breaks. They do so with responsibility and integrity. And if you enjoy group breaks and are looking for a company to break with, check out Filth Bomb, streaming on Fanatics Live on 4 channels, 7 days a week, guys. And if you are looking to add a grail to your collection, check out Fund Your Cards at fundyourcards.com. They are the hobby's leading consolidator, and they will help you finance the purchase of your grail with your own cards. And they just launched their back end portal, which is pretty awesome. We did an episode just last week with Mark from Fund Your Cards. And finally, Mint Inc. is a leading hobby brand in Canada. They offer a full range of services from in-person shopping, live event experiences at their 2 Toronto locations, online shopping, with worldwide shipping, live stream shopping, auctions, breaks, grading, and more. Their primary focus is to bring the ultimate hobby experience to collectors in Canada. And on every episode of Sports Cards Live through the end of the year, we will be giving away a $50 gift card, including tonight, guys. Check out hobbynewsdaily.com for your daily dose of hobby news, headlines, and a podcast. Leighton Sheldon from Just Collect will not be joining us tonight. He's at the Philly show, unable to join, unfortunately. And guys, this show is available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please follow, subscribe for free, leave a rating or review. Greatly appreciate that on whatever podcast platform you are watching on. Thank you, everybody, as always, for your loyal viewership. And as always, your questions, your comments are in play. Now let's bring out our co-host, Mr. Joe Poirot from Santa Cruz. Joe Poirot from Santa Cruz. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Jay Lee. Hey, you're looking a few years younger there. Did something happen?
What are you talking about?
You look clean.
Yeah, the beard was starting to really starting to aggravate me. So yesterday I just sort of decided, you know what, it's coming off. So
nice.
It's gone. Yeah,
takes a few years off you, and probably feels good too. I know when you get all clean shaven, it's a nice feeling. But I'm doing well. We had a tornado up in the Santa Cruz mountains today, so the community was a little phased by that, understandably. Some cars overturned. I don't think I've ever heard of a tornado in this neck of the woods, so that was unusual, but everything else is going well.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, I spent the day at the local card show put on by Rob, who owns Overtime Sports Cards and Grading here in Calgary. And I walk into the show, it was about 9 a.m. and I see Rob, and he calls me over. So I walk over to him, and he says to me, he goes, "What do you think is Connor Bedard's best rookie card?" I said, the Cup RPA is probably going to be his best rookie card when it comes out. He goes, no. The one best card. I go, oh, I don't know, the Ultimate Shield, the SP Authentic Future Watch Auto 101. He goes, uh-huh. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, pulls it out of his pocket and shows it to me. He opened a box this morning and pulled the Connor Bedard SP Authentic Future Watch Auto 101 patch. It's like a 7-color patch. Amazing card. And that was the talk of the show. And I think as he told me, he put it out on his social media and he started hearing from everybody about it. So I think that card might even have a bounty on it out there somewhere. But that was a pretty big pull. But the show was pretty fun today. Sold a few cards, took in a few consignments for Slab Sharks, and had it's a nice 6-hour show from 10 to 4. So it was nice, man. It was nice. Yeah. And guys, tonight's show, we have a fun show tonight. I'm really enjoying this Sports Cards Live 2.0 kind of format. We got Carvin Chung joining us in about 5 minutes here. Brent Wire, Deep Value Investor, is going to be joining us. Josh Adams, who is Midwest Vintage on Instagram and from 90s Auctions. We've got Iowa Dave, who just came off his 27 Decisions series of podcasts. He's going to be joining us, and then Chris McGill as well. So we got a star-studded lineup tonight. I'm excited for it. Let's say hello to the crowd. The professor is here as always. Good evening, Professor Pick Six Cards. What's going on? Jacob Dahl, good to see you. Laura, welcome to the show. Robert Scott, hello. David Archbell, good to see you. Kinger, good evening. Linda's first. I think his name's actually Michael somewhere. Linda's first. What's going on? Good to see you. Fourth game. Paul Masheri, welcome back. Daniel A, good to see you. Mike, what's going on? Yitz is here. Going to be another great show. Sign of the Times, vintage, clean shaven. That is correct. We got Julian and Abdul from the Currency Project. Wesley collects. Merry Christmas. Thank you, Yetz. Appreciate it. Mookie. Jeremy equals authentic altered evidence of trimming beard. Yes, pure evidence for sure. Didn't that card have a nice bounty? Yeah, we were trying to figure that out today. I don't know if it had a bounty of 80,000, 250,000, 0. I'm not sure. Exactly what is up with that. GC, what's going on? Mr. Manos, Yankees fan, Stale Prod. Yeah, we have a great lineup for sure. And yes, I remembered Linda's first name is actually Michael. Good stuff. Good stuff. So lots to talk about tonight, Joe. We've got the CT scanning thing is kind of back into the news after a few months of not being front and center. 2025 is right around the corner here. And I was thinking about what are some of our concerns for the hobby going into 25? And then I thought, well, let's also look at what are some of the. So I actually asked ChatGPT because I'm like, what's the opposite of a concern? Because it would be nice to have some balance. Well, they came up with reassurances. Okay, concerns, reassurances, and then maybe on a personal level, what are some of our goals going into 2025? That could be interesting as well. But the best part about this new format is we have all these guests bringing their own topics, and we definitely have some of those today between the 5 guests that we have coming on with us. And something that I just did, this one that I think, Joe, you might have been hanging out with me and helping me, but I went through my collection. People always ask, what are your best cards? It's like, I don't know. Like I got different cards in different PCs. So I actually took a minute, took an evening probably, and tried to figure out what my top best 100 cards are. And I think I kind of have that figured out, or I'm almost there. And it was nice to look at my cards in that mix instead of just like all my hockey here, my vintage baseball here, et cetera, et cetera. It was nice to basketball. It was nice to get them all mixed together and look at them that way and kind of put a value on them and then sort them by that value. And so I've kind of done that. Adam Gray does his annual 100 card countdown. He gets great engagement from it. And so I kind of said, like, what should I, now that I've done this, should I do anything with it or just keep it for myself? And I'm not sure. So I want to hear from people out there, like, what should I do with that? Should I do a countdown on Instagram, an episode on here? What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I know you see various geometric figures on IG of trees, perhaps Christmas trees, I don't know, that kind of highlight people's, collections and the highlights of their collections. And I think you and I were talking through it at one stage. I know it was a longer process than just, a single sit down because you've got a lot of cards to sort through. My curiosity is always, not necessarily just straight value, but value to you, so continuing to refine your own sensibilities about what's, and let's be honest, a lot of times our most valuable cards, in terms of a financial sense of value, are our most important cards. And there could be, reasons both aesthetically, but also, financially for that. But I'd love it if you showed off some of them. I know in the process of you going through them, I fell in love with one or two of your cards that I kind of knew you had, but for some reason seeing them again, I was like, ooh, I'd like to. So, showing them off in some way. I don't know exactly how you want to do it, but I think that'd be fun.
Yeah. I'll figure something out. It's interesting you said like value is one thing, and then there's like how much do you love them? Because my favorite card is probably my 40th most valuable card or something like that. So maybe it would be interesting to do like, okay, this is my, my 100th best card value wise, but it's actually my 60th favorite. Maybe I need to do 2 lists and
2 numbers.
I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Who knows? And have like what has the biggest differential between the most value And then my favorite, like, is not my most valuable might be my 40th favorite. That's a 40 differential. I don't know. There's different ways to skin that cat.
You could rank them within the genre too. You could have, each template could have a few different rankings. Like, this is the best within the hockey category, or this is the best within the, game used mem category. I mean, you could get pretty elaborate depending on how much spare time you have.
How much time do I want to spend analyzing my own card collection? Yeah. Okay. Well, Laura says, was that Mookie? Was that with CT? No, this mug is nice and fresh without the use of CT scanning. I promise you all that. Happy holidays, Mid-Atlantic and everybody. Of course, Jeff McMahon. Hello, CH Cart. Canada Post is back. Yeah, Canada Post is coming back, guys. That is big news and good news. No doubt. Mr. Canoe says I should give them all away. Wesley says countdown special. Michael, yes, show them. A countdown sounds cool. Jiggle all the way down to the show. Your best, not necessarily the price. Yeah, I get that for sure. Mookie says Joe's hitting it. The best of those top card countdowns features the stories behind them, the deals, the people they're at. Yeah, if I did, it wouldn't just be like, here's number 100, number 9. No, there would be, why is it in my collection? Maybe how or when did I get it? Why do I love it? Plans for it, intentions, that kind of thing. How long do I plan to keep it, etc., etc. Lucky says most sentimental cards and why would be interesting. Yeah, that would be a part of it as well. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for the ideas with that. Why don't we go ahead now, Joe, and bring out our first guest of the evening. Carvin, are you ready to come on? Thumbs up. He's ready. All right, let's bring him on, guys. Carvin, welcome back to the show. And I have to say, Carv, I'm a little embarrassed because when we were chatting the other day, you're like, yeah, it's been like 3 years since I've been on your show. And guys, if you don't know, Carvin was the very first guest ever on Sports Cards Live. And we've had over 300 people through here, maybe more by now. Carvin, welcome back, buddy.
Well, it's great to be back. And hello, Joe, and hello, Jeremy. And hello to the Sports Card Live crew here. So hello, everyone. Nice to be back after 3 years.
I can't believe when you told me that, I was like, it's been that long. I actually couldn't believe that it had, because you've been on several times, but 3 years is too long. So unfortunately we can't rewind, but we got you here now. And you know what? It's pretty special to me, Carv, that you were the first guest ever. And I tell the story, I go on all sorts of other podcasts and they always ask, so like, tell us how you got started with Sports Cards Live. And you come up every single time I tell the story. It's like, I got the channel, I got the name, Sports Cards Live, got a logo done. Then I called up my buddy Carvin. It's like, and I go, Carv, I'm gonna go live on YouTube on Saturday. It was Saturday, April the 18th, 2020. I said, do you want to come on? I'll interview you. And here we are, 4.5 years later. And Sports Cards Live has taken on a life of its own and done hundreds of interviews now. So you were the first, man. You were the first. But why don't you let people know who may not know where you are and what a bit of just your quick history in the hobby, some of your accomplishments, and what you're doing now.
Well, I've been in the hobby for 40 years. Ultimately, I'm a collector. Started off as a collector when I was a kid and then gave it up for a while, and then came back when 89 Upper Deck hit the market. And I said, wow, trading cards have evolved to this level. And I got into it, and eventually I got into a flea market, had a store, started working for distribution in Canada. And lo and behold, I had got my dream job, a passion of mine to work for Upper Deck in 2001. And unfortunately, in 2010, I needed a break from trading cards and moved over to Asia for a year, and then came back to work for Panini for 3 years. And but then my new wife, I got married. My new wife didn't want to stay in Texas, and we moved back to California. So right now I'm back in California in SoCal. Probably going to make the journey for my family to move back to Canada. I don't know when, probably within the next 2 years. That way my daughter can get to know my family more, just have a family support and some of the friends that I have back home. But outside of that, I mean, I think a lot of the accomplishments I had leading the team, seeing the vision, and I think as an end result, I think Jeremy can show you what's happened over the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Jacob Dahl welcomes you back. Stale Prod says the exquisite man. Meanwhile, Linda's first as Mr. Cup. So you're known for conceiving and creating Upper Deck's exquisite brand, Upper Deck's the Cup brand. Currency saying hello, Mookie, Carvin 2.0. Jeff wants to welcome you back at all. A lot of people who are here, the loyal viewers of Sports Cards Live. I think we've all missed you on the show, Carvin. So let's talk about that for a second, because it is pretty exciting. I mean, and what we're alluding to here, everybody, is that sports cards have become more mainstream, and it's really been a process that's been going on over the past 4 years or so. All started with COVID, of course, but right now there is an auction going on Sotheby's, and Sotheby's, as you probably know, is mostly known for its fine art auctions and rare artifacts and these kinds of things, Carv. But what they've done is there's a very special, exquisite, Upper Deck exquisite basketball. They're calling it the Capsule Collection. I think it doesn't go live until Monday. I think it goes live on Monday on Sotheby's, or it ends Monday on Sotheby's. Which one is it?
I think it ends. I think it ends on Monday. So go take a look, guys.
Yeah, here. So guys, I'm just going to show Valor. What's up, Valor? I read your story on Instagram, or heard your story on Instagram. Sorry to hear that, bud. Valor has been having some issues, I guess, streaming on or getting banned from Fanatics Live and doing breaks there. But check out Valor's Instagram if you want to learn more about what's going on with Valor. Okay, so here's the auction. This is pretty cool, Carvin. So this is the Sotheby's website, the Exquisite Capsule Collection online auction. And if anyone wants to just read this is a full kind of curated article. And it's all really discussion with look at Carvin here. This is probably 15 years ago, just a baby in the picture. But it starts off with what inspired you in your involvement in the Upper Deck Exquisite Collection. And he talks about, starting back in 2002, learning about, this new high school kid coming out of Cleveland named LeBron James. And so there's a lot of text here. It's actually a good read. Feature some of his favorites from the auction that are going to be auctioned off on Sotheby's. And first of all, Carv, it's really cool. Congratulations, because here's what I really like about this fact that you and these exquisite cards are being featured on Sotheby's. I like that it's bringing the sports card world into the mainstream art world. Now, there have been attempts at this in the past and with a bit of success, but I think this might be the biggest push in that direction. And I just think it's really cool that they are putting the focus on the artwork, the cards, and the artist, or what we call, the architect yourself. So and I want to get Joe's perspective on this too, but let's start with you, Carv. What do you think it's going to mean to sports cards mainstream, if anything, the fact that they're putting the focus on the cards and the person behind them?
Well, I think it's we always talk about multiple collectibles, right, or multiple artworks. So not only if it's an abstract piece of work, but it could be Picasso, or in the case of Exquisite, one of the inspirations, what I was inspired by, was Jackson Pollock. So when you look at a piece where it's just like paint splashes and all that, and you're like, okay, what is this? Half the time, artwork is related to the story behind the artist. Now, do I believe that fine art is trading cards? I don't equate it the same way. With that being said, my mom was an artist. She's an Oriental painting artist. My uncle was a graphic artist, and also he graduated from OCA. If you know art, Ontario College of Art is considered one of the top art schools in the world, right? And same as my mom, she went to a school in Taiwan, taught by goats. She was taught by goats. Her art. So to me, I put artists on a pedestal. But with that said, you look at, if I see a picture of Yosemite and El Capitan in black and white, it's Ansel Adams. Okay, we know it's an Ansel Adams piece. We know that there's coffee books, there's all kinds of photographs that he has done. But what about Ansel Adams, the man? What prompted him to stay in Yosemite Park for 2 years, capturing that one shot that meant everything that we all look at today and say, wow. And I want to capture the passion that creators, it's great that Sotheby's tells a story, because now you can capture the passion that creators have for their art or for their work. And I think that's important, to tell the story. As you said, you want to know the stories of how much passion or how much you gave up to get a card. Why not go to one step level for the person that created that card or created that piece of artwork or created that photograph, understand their passion and what went into it.
Yeah.
And that tells the story.
Yeah, that kind of builds on the whole provenance thing as well. This is like deep state provenance, right? You can track the ownership of a card right down to watching it being, released from a pack on a live stream somewhere. But you can go deeper. You can go into the deep state and understand like what was the creator of that set, the brand manager, the designer, the architect. What were they thinking when they came up with it? And are you finding nowadays, are you being approached and asked more of these questions as, social media and various online platforms have even brought you more front and center?
There is. I mean, Exquisite obviously is the one brand that everyone is fully aware of. But there's other brands that I've had times where I was just had a brand in front of me and it's just like I have a creative block. I don't know what to do, right? And then all of a sudden I came up with an idea, just maybe some people will call it a gimmick or something that hasn't been done in the hobby, and that was the product that had that one thing that we had and that no one has seen before. For example, the first ever Logo Man card was an Exquisite. That was an Upper Deck Series 2 in 0203, and it was 3 players: Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and Jay Williams. And you're like, well, why would Jay Williams be one of those guys? Well, he was actually one of our spokesmen. We actually put Kevin Garnett is not a spokesman, so Topps and Flair could do memorabilia cards of Kevin Garnett, but Jay Williams was the hot rookie that year, and he was a spokesman, and he was one of the people on Logomania. So if I wanted to collect Logo Man cards and I don't want to pay the premium for Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, I would collect Jay Williams as that's the first ever Logo Man card created.
That's
right?
cool.
Other stuff like Scriptus Swatches is a famous autograph game used patch. Well, guess what? In 0102, in a product I created for Upper Deck called UD Mass, that was the first ever one. There's actually, that was the first ever card that we had autographs on sign on game used patches. Yet those cards don't go for a lot more than what Cup cards go for or Exquisite cards go for. But that was the pioneer that went into Exquisite and Cup. So those are things that I always constantly remember. I don't talk about them because no one really talks about UD Mask. Well, sure, that product was came back, or I wish that we have all these other products like Logomania. They don't talk about them, but I know them because I was there upon the creation. So
I just want to touch on that auto patch, and I want to go to Joe. But when I was at Fanatics Fest in New York, I ran into a friend of mine in the hobby, Michael Awada, and we were chatting, and he was looking at a scripted swatch. And I said to him, I go, I'm not really a fan of these autos on patch cards because sometimes the autos don't look good or they fade, or depends on the patch and the marker used. And he said, oh, really? He goes, I think it's cool because you're getting a card and an autographed jersey all in one. And I thought to myself, like, kind of, that was like an epiphany from like, that is actually kind of pretty cool. An autographed game used jersey and a card all in one. I thought that was cool. But Joe, I want to get your perspective on what it means or what it might mean bringing, putting the focus on the cards and the designer behind them. I'm not talking about the aesthetic designer, but the conception of the product, because Carbon is the creator. He conceived all these brand names from Immaculate to Black to Cup to Exquisite. What do you think it means with a company or an auction house like Sotheby's bringing it front and center?
Obviously, it's I think a boon for the hobby in terms of exposure and acknowledging that even if it's not maybe fine arts, as Carvin mentioned, in the kind of extreme form, it's certainly an art form. And I think we're all in agreement. I mean, looking at recent sales and the attention that the Exquisite brand in particular recently upticking in auctions, agrees that it's a very high level of art. So it's exciting, I would say. And I was just going to throw in one question. I never grow tired of hearing about Carvin's early days and kind of what his team was up to. And I know within any brand, Carv, there's constraints, the style, what's been done before, and how are you going to sort of bridge maybe something new from what was happening at Upper Deck up to that point. Did you feel any constraints, or how wide open did you feel the field was for you as you started to kind of create in the vein of the first Exquisite release?
Well, I mean, let's go back to when I first started at Upper Deck, right? I thought I was walking into a manufacturer, and this is the same for any manufacturer, that everyone loves trading cards. Everyone knows trading cards. Boy, was I wrong. Only about 5% of the people at the trading card companies understand cards and understand collectors, because you got to have the best at what they do, whether it's picking photographs, doing pre-press work, or working at the manufacturing, printing the cards. So the key component of every team is really the product development team, or your brand managers and creative minds, and working with the graphic artist. The graphic artists don't know much about cards, especially in those days. So what was interesting was that I've always talked to the collectors, and I was like, man, you guys give us a lot of feedback. You guys give us some very constructive criticism, as we call it. I go, but no matter how many battles that I have with collectors explaining everything, the process, and them not accepting it, I knew that they had a passion for cards, and I always respected that. It's always tougher to explain it internally at a company, because these were like, just trading cards. Why do you care so much? Why do we have to have the most updated teams? Why do we have the most updated jerseys? Or why can't we just feature the rookies later? Like, they don't understand of having that rookie. If not having that rookie will impact, the launch of the product and the successful launch of the product, and thus it impacts our revenue and our profits. So you have to almost bring it back and explain everything in detail to the internal team, so that they have an understanding of what's going on. And that's how you build the team camaraderie. When I first went in there, it was like, man, you guys don't understand cards. Like, I'm pulling hairs on my head. Like, come on, guys. Like, don't you not understand this? Like, but over time, as you are working with the team, you start developing that relationship and creating that team atmosphere. So that's really important for us going in there, not assuming that everyone has the same knowledge as us. And same thing for us OG collectors with the whole, post-COVID, all these collectors coming in and saying, oh, I know this. Well, hold on a second here. Maybe you might want to listen to some OGs and help educate the process of how it got to this point. And hopefully you can learn from it, right? That's all we want. We want to build that community. So
like the Uno Mas says, Carvin himself is an OG. And, you're talking about they're just trading cards to a lot of the people at card companies. It's like, it's a widget, right? It's just, this is the product, and let's put it out there. And I guess the question that I want to ask to build off what you were just saying, Carv, is, what do you think about the card companies today? Upper Deck, Panini, Topps. Do you think that they are still sitting with 5% of their staff that understands trading cards? Or do you think that number, that percentage has gotten higher over the past, you started Upper Deck, 20 something years ago. But even in the last 5 to 10 years, do you feel like we've seen more understanding of collectors from within the trading card companies, or less?
I'm sure there's more people that are obviously it's become more mainstream. So you're going to have people with different opinions. And, as people have opinions, you just got to, create that team atmosphere where you want people to bring back feedback. And then together you can say, hey, does this work? Does this not work? Right. One of the things that I always dealt with, when I first started, I said, no, I can't do that. Well, to get the creative mind going, the best thing to do is to say to someone is that, you know what, that's a great idea. And not to really provide lip service, as everyone may say, but you say, that's a great idea. You may say, hey, I want every single card to be hard sign. I want it to be 5 color patches. You go, that's a great idea. Then you say, okay, maybe there is always a pathway. You always try to find a pathway. Say, when there's a will, there's a way. But let's say if I have to spend $5 million and selling only $2 million worth of product, well, it's not feasible then for the company to do so. Or we have to go out there and buy 100 game used jerseys of one player just to get the nicest patches and throw away the rest of the jersey. Well, your cost is going to go up. So those are things that I always challenge people that come into the company to say, you know what? Give me some ideas. When I say do this and you say we can't do it, don't say you can't do it. Say we can do it. Give me some creative solutions. And then from all those creative solutions, provide all the feedback and say, can we do it? Can we not do it? And then maybe perhaps there is that one opportunity to do it, right? We just don't know. But the thing is that the whole purpose of that is to create creativity and create that you are starting to think and innovate ideas. Or else if you always say no, then you're not going to have that area for creativity, right? You're not going to help create people to have that open mindset. So.
All right, let's go to a few comments here. The Mangini Collect, John Mangini, hobby president, former guest of Sports Cards Live 2.0, is in the house. What's up, John? Good to see you. Mark Santucci, good to see you. Mark Justin Bode, good to see you. Jake from 90s B-Ball Cards. Ben Diamond says, Is there going to be a cage match between Signed and Slabbed and Deep Value Investor tonight? No, there will not be, because Signed and Slabbed is not joining the show, but Deep Value is. He just got to the studio. We'll bring him up here very shortly. Good evening, Stukes. Good to see you. Chris C says Upper Deck had more innovation than many others did. Just wish they were still allowed to do baseball and basketball. I'm sure you are not alone in those sentiments, Chris C. Currency Project says, y'all know how we feel about fine art and cards. It was only a matter of time before Sotheby's brought them into the same sphere. Collectors are collectors are collectors. It is in our blood. Yes, sir. Can't disagree with that. And Chris says, cards I love, slabs I think are overemphasized. Give me a beat up old vintage card that's centered and doesn't need any number grade. To me, hey, I think you're not alone on that either. Bobby Burrell is in the house. Lots going on tonight. And hey, Jeremy, what's going on, Bobby? Laura says the Upper Deck brand has always been one of the more consistently unique brands. The portrayal of a good amount of their photos of the players are always eye-catching. And holy, Irving Manera from Manera Sports Card is gracing us with his presence. Irving, it's been a long time, buddy. Another former guest of the show and a friend of mine. Good to see you, Irving Manera from Manera Sports Cards. Very good. Carv, I want to get your thoughts on CT scanning, because
Sure.
you know, it kind of reared its ugly head in August. Apparently it's been happening for a long time. And now we've seen Boston card hunter Nick has really been doing some good work to bring it to the forefront so people are aware. What are your thoughts on the CT scanning of unopened product as it impacts our hobby?
Okay, well, it always goes back to provenance. I think it's really important that people value provenance. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is that when it comes to provenance now, you're seeing that certain cards that people have owned for a long time and probably from day one came out of products, people are now saying, hey, that patch is probably legit because it's been in the collection forever, right? So same thing for even wax cases and wax boxes. If it's been sitting at a collector's house from day one, and that person is very ethical and he's not going to CT scan it, or he doesn't have the time to CT scan it because he has so many cases, then chances are he hasn't done it, right? So if you want to open wax and you're acquiring it from a someone else that have acquired from the manufacturers from day one and put it aside, and you continuously, let's say you test it out and you continuously have good hits in it, then chances are you don't have to worry about CT scanning. I mean, this is not something that's new. It's just that technology has gotten to this point where that is new and people are doing it. In the past, there's been resealed cases. There's been packs that have been, tampered with. We've seen this time and time again. The hobby is always going to be under attack. There's always going to be bad people, ill-willed people in any place we go to in the world, right? That 1% or 2%. And if you want to go say, hey, I'm going to buy that for the cheapest price around and from this person that's unknown, well, then you're taking risk, right? Whether it's been stuff that's been reslabbed or counterfeit cards, everything of that nature, or swapped out patches. All this happens in our hobby. It's up to us to police ourselves and us to hold people on a pedestal or in a different class that are ethical and can supply us with product or singles. And that's the main key, is that building that relationship is the most important.
It really is. But the fact of the matter nowadays is that a lot of people are buying product online in breaks, lots of high-end stuff out there. And as we've learned, if the information is factual, is that there are companies now set up to scan unopened product. And what does that mean? And really, is that going to have a long-standing impact on things, or will the card companies, the producers, the manufacturers, will they need to find a way to reduce the impact it has through some, I don't know, packaging strategy or distribution strategy or something like that?
So let's review like some other areas where there's been bad actors, right?
Well,
okay, so
we can do that, but I really want to focus on this piece.
No,
here.
I'm just giving you an example, right? I'm just giving you an example. For example, if someone has graded cards and they have raw cards, are you going to trust their raw cards then?
Well, it's a great question, because you hear that
right?
all the time. They say, like,
so
why isn't this one? Well,
right. So for example, if someone is a breaker and they have all the greatest hits and they're wholesaling cases out, are you going to trust those cases now? You may give it a try and there's good hits in there, then you say, okay, well, I trust it then. But if there's nothing good in hits in terms of buying 10, 15 cases, not to trust that breaker anymore. So once again, you got to build that relationship and find the right ethical people to work with and buy and sell from. Chances are, if you're buying from a distributor or you're buying from, Fanatics or Upper Deck or Direct, you don't have to worry about that. I think those.
Yeah, I think relationships is the best thing you said there, in my opinion. Because if you trust who you're buying it from, I think that's the best way to defend yourself against it. But it's like, I had somebody at the card show today tell me, he's like, I don't trust anybody, and there's a lot of people out there that just don't trust anybody. Okay, let's just couch that for a second and say hello to Not My Chair. Welcome to the show. We do have some comments here on the CT scanning thing right now. Justin says, yeah, it's a sticky wicket. Matthew 1956 Tops guy says the CT scanning thing seems like it will result in more redemptions. That's the most natural solution. High density packaging sounds hard and expensive. I agree, but redemptions is a big step backwards, and they don't want to do that. But it might be one of the pieces of the solution if the card companies take it that seriously. I think Justin said, I think the value of the LCS just went up as long as the cards still continue to flow through the LCSs. Professor, I found it interesting from Boston Card Hunter that the CT was able to scan through the tin of the cup product. Yeah, not just the cup, any product that comes from a tin. Irving says, I have passed on loose packs of Pokemon of newer sets because they may be weighed. Can't imagine if they were CT scanned. And Signed in Slab David says, we wish there was only 2% bad actors running around. All right. We're going to bring on Brent, deep value investor. We're referring to him as the Poirot man. Brent, are you good to come on? He is good. All right. I can't hear you. I need the thumbs up. Give me the thumbs up, Brent. There it is. All right, guys. Let's welcome back Brent Wire to the show. Got the Christmas tree going. Brent, how you doing, buddy? Welcome back.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. This is what a treat to be on with you guys.
Well, it's good to have you back. I don't know if you remember Joe. Have you had a chance? You must have met Carvin at some point along the way.
I don't think I've ever met him in person, but we've talked a little bit about cards on Instagram. That's one of the beauties of Instagram that I love, is getting in contact with people that have been around this hobby for a really long time. So, I consider it a lot of gratitude even being on the screen with you guys.
Nice. Well, appreciate that. Last time you were on, we had actually, Joe, you were kind of. Do you want to introduce that? We had Brent on last time. He came on, and then the next time we had the hobby president, John Mangini, and John got to sort of address some of the stuff that Brent discussed the episode before, but Brent wasn't here for that. He couldn't make it. So he's here today. And Joe, do you want to sort of introduce that back and forth topic and let Brent respond at all?
Sure, I can try. My memory is a little imperfect around it, but I think it, ushered on a general discussion about maybe potentially snobbery of vintage collectors versus modern sensibilities, something along those lines. Brent, do you kind of remember that moment? And then John, when John came on and you weren't here, he was sort of mentioning that maybe the context was a little bit not exactly what was intended. But I said, yeah, but I still think Brent had some important things to say there regarding maybe just how we tend to understand some of the dichotomies between modern and vintage. So does that help out or jog your memory?
Yeah, I listened to a little bit, but it still wasn't exactly clear to me what it was that I said that was so disagreed with or incorrect. It just kind of sounded like there's difference of opinions around the hobby and the way it used to be versus now, and more bad actors now versus in the past. And I think I mentioned some of the ways that people used to be bad actors in the past. And
that's what it was.
I was even thinking about how we have card ladder and market movers and the visibility of comps now, and the ability, like there's so much information now that when there are things that happen, like the CT scanning, I feel like there's a short, disruption in the space, but then the hobby's quick to figure out ways to get around it. It reminds me of, the green PMGs in football, and how, for a while, like the hobby was like not wanting to buy them at all in BGS slabs because no one understood the serial stamping on the back and how there's some fake ones out there. Then it turns out that they're just sheet cut, and it turns out they came actually from Fleer, but different serial number on the back. And then we're able to establish which serial number was the correct one. And then we adjust. And so it just kind of feels like there's way more information now. Yeah, there is the ability to have bad actors out there, but I think about, 20 years ago when cards are just being mailed and, they're just labeled as fair condition, mint condition, or great, and you're just trusting somebody to mail you a card based on his opinion, and there's no grading companies, and you're paying money for cards and not knowing if they're trimmed or not. So, I don't really know what it is that I don't think there's a big disagreement really. Just different perspectives.
Yeah, you're jogging my memory too, and I think it was more just what I took away from your comments was that we might romanticize a previous era, that maybe there are some romantic elements to what it was like in the old days, but there was also still bad actors and plenty of funny business going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I wanted to just sort of do that. Let's go back to CT scanning for a sec, guys. I want to go to a couple of comments here. We have in the chat, Ben Burrows is teamed up with Darren Ravel on Collect, CLLCT.com, a news aggregating reporting website. Ben says, part of my reporting in July included a note that the dosimeter sticker could be, or a dosimeter sticker could be included on boxes that changes color when exposed to radiation. I've been told that this is likely the easiest solution. Well, that's good news right there. Professor says Boston Card Hunter is being quoted that the resolution of the industrial CT scanner is 10 microns. I spoke with an MRI company last week that is constructing a scanner that can match that resolution, which just tells me more competition coming in that area. JP, the problem with CT scanning is the negative perception more than anything. And this to me is what people aren't thinking about. It actually only has an impact on higher end product where it makes sense to scan for the price point. Well, that's a temporary thing where it makes sense, because that cost is only going to come down as these companies scale and competition is introduced. So it will be no time, I believe, until it'll make sense to scan $100 box of cards for, $15 or something. Matt Chapman, this has nothing to do with current conversation, longtime listener, first time live, met Jeremy at the National, showed him my Hank Aaron and Batman rookie, keep the hobby positive. Matthew Chapman, welcome to the show. Good to see you here for sure. So those comments that I just made about, with technology comes, prices de-escalate. That's going to happen. They're going to come down. There will be more services offering the scanning of boxes. We know that they can measure centering on cards right down to, the 100th of an inch sort of thing. It's pretty amazing that this is the case. And the hobby is based on that experience of opening up a pack of cards. Like that's where a lot of us got our start. Even, people who don't break wax or open packs anymore. That's where we got our start, was opening packs. And it was that surprise to get that last card you needed to finish off your 84 Topps baseball set or whatever it was. And if that surprise is either removed or that someone else might know what's in there already, that is where that long-term impact and the perception that it could happen. The threat might not be the actual application of this technology. It might be the perceived application of the technology that could cause a threat to the hobby. So, Brent, you just joined us. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm always looking for a way to zag. So, opening up wax is a gamble as it is. So now I feel like the gamble just got cheaper because there's probably an opportunity right now to get wax at a cheaper price because people are scared. So if you're smart, if you know who to buy from, if you do some research and you can take a educated guess, there's probably an opportunity right now. Just like I saw the opportunity in BGS slabs for green PMGs in football. If you do your research, if you figure out which ones are legit, most people don't know which ones are legit and there's fear out there, there's opportunity. So I would say right now with wax, there's probably the best opportunity. For example, in our premier auction, we have a gold prism Jason Tatum that was just pulled out of a box of wax out of a hobby shop. So like not every box is CT scan. There's probably a small percentage of them that are. And so it's a gamble as it is. So your gamble probably just got cheaper. I may even start to look at some exquisite boxes or something that might be out there. If there's enough fear and I see it drop enough, you know, it could be an opportunity to zag here. But that's just the way I think. I'm always trying to think of an opportunity. So Jeremy, you look like you're zagging.
It's funny. Whenever I need to see something on my screen, my camera sits in front of my monitor. So if I have to see what's going on behind I got to look that way or that way to see something. Well, okay, a couple. I like Stuke's comment. I've seen some of the bad actors of the past called hobby legends of today. They never left the hobby. What I was trying to do is, I was trying to actually make it so that when I bring a comment on, you all shift up. We all shift up so we don't block you. But I can't find that switch right now. Sign and Slab says just ignoring it is the main hobby response for virtually all issues. This one might not be easy. The Cage has joined us. He says easy fix. You all wanted more redemptions. Now redemptions are the answer. Look at his tools. Is doing it with a debut. I think maybe look at Topps is doing it with the debut patch auto redemptions. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that might be one of the ways to do it. Carvin, you've got some insights into manufacturing. Like, what do you think? If this is the issue that some of us think it is, if this is as big of a threat as some of us think it is, do you believe that, adding some sort of radiation sensor to the outside of the box is the solution? Is it back to redemptions? Is it direct to consumer? What are the fixes, Carv? You're
Wow. Well, at the end of the day, there's really no easy fixes, right? It's always a competition here. You got bad actors out there and you're trying to, prevent those people from coming in. And then they're always going to find ways of getting to it, whether it's going to be CT scanning today and tomorrow it's going to be electron microscope, right? I mean, they can go down to the detail. Like, I like Cage's answer about putting redemptions, but you can see the redemptions, right? If you get to 10 microns, you see every single card if you slice it up properly. So it doesn't matter. In other words, you have to have an unknown redemption to say, hey, guess what? That could be something huge or not huge. But then at that point, people can counterfeit redemptions, right? So every solution always has its pros and cons. And I think at the end of the day, if you really want to talk about it, the easiest way is direct to consumer then, right? For a manufacturer, they sell everything direct to consumer, which is that what you really want? So be careful what you wish for. That's why I always tell people when I'm talking about solutions that be very careful what you wish for, because, for example, if you're concerned about swapped out patches, for example, right? And every single one has to be identified and photographed and everything. Well, the cost of doing that is probably going to be $10 to $15 per card, and you're going to be paying even more money for your packs. So you gotta weigh out the pros and cons, right? And I think gotta be careful what you wish for, because if everyone's going to complain about this, all the manufacturers say, you know what, all our high-end products we're going to sell directly to the consumer then. And
then that's the end or not the end, but that's a big challenge for LCSs at that point. So.
LCS breakers, everyone, right?
Yeah.
So be careful.
So Card Fuchsia says, as an investor, shouldn't you scan your boxes? I mean, and Chris C laughs and says it's called ethics. Even if I had access to one, I would pass. I think a lot of us are in that boat right there, where we just wouldn't do it because it's just bad. It's just bad. Card Fuchsia says GPS tags so you can track where the boxes have been. What's that really going to mean to you? It could just be, shipment patterns and all that. Tough to say. Linda's first, even direct to consumer. Once a consumer gets it, it's the same deal. It's all about the secondary market. TJ is online. What's going on, TJ? Good to see you. And David says, if you guys are going to talk about provenance, how does that extend to auction consignment houses? Should they assess that of their consigners? I mean, that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting topic right there. Like, what are the moral, ethical, and like the expectations upon auction houses? Do they need to question a card once it's in a slab, or just let it go? I mean, to me, an auction company is literally a middleman. And
here's an example of what happened with Heritage right now with the exquisite cards, right? Because it's part of and Chris had told me about this. I didn't even know about this. It's a part of the collection called the Yeo collection, right? Or the Dimitri Young collection. So now if you identify where that provenance goes, let's say it's a wax collection of a famous wax collector, then they say, hey, this is the Carvin Chung wax collection, and they know that I don't do this CT scan my cases, then guess what? There's that provenance that you have that. And also, once you start buying cases from somebody, that is flipping cases or someone that's a collector and you get good hits, well, if they're CT scanning, they're going to take all the good hits out, right? They're not going to hold on to it. So you also have to also wonder, especially with the price of wax, like everyone's going to be scanning hours and hours to find that one elusive card. Are you really that thinking about, well, I'm going to spend $100,000 just to scan out to get that $500,000 card? It's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. To what degree, right? Tampered cases used to be a huge thing back in the day when cases were pretty reasonable. There's less and less tampered cases these days because of that reason, is that it's too expensive to do it and so time consuming. So you just gotta understand that it takes hours and a ton of money to CAT or CT scan anything. Now, obviously, the technology is going to get cheaper. For now, yeah, it can get cheaper. But if you have a good paying job and you're breaking tons of cases, do you really have time to go there and CT scan everything? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to trust the source, right?
But remember, back in the day, a computer took up filled up a whole wing of a university. Nowadays, we have computers in our pockets. Eventually, right. I just feel like with any technology, it'll be scaled down, and the applications will be scaled up, and the cost to do it.
The cost of the cases. You gotta, not only do you have to buy the cases, you gotta offload them, right? So, and how do you offload 100 cases of high-end product? It's not so simple if people find out that there's CT scanning issues. So those are things that those are practical things that can come into play. That's all I'm saying.
LGC says all sealed products should be ripped. Hopefully prices will adjust downward and the cost of opening will be worth the rip. All cards should be in the wild. Yeah, eventually I'd like to see them all in the wild for sure. Chris has wax dating back to 79. I'm not that concerned considering I bought it years ago and nothing I own is high end. Cage says, Carvin, people suck. That's the constant. I remember people searching packs when die cuts came out in the early 90s. I like direct to consumer. People will always scam. You guys remember the G.I. Joe debacle? Of course. Yes. What is Matt Chapman? I don't know how anyone can make it to their vehicle with a box of cards without opening it, let alone finding a scanner. Mark says, I agree with Jeremy. The auction houses are not responsible for cards if they turn out fake. They just supply the owners of the cards are responsible. I mean, well, I don't know about the owners of the cards. I think some things just are, left to the grading company. I mean, we're relying on them to authenticate and grade. And if they make a mistake, I mean, you kind of want to be able to have recourse. And I think, PSA is really the only one I'm aware of the big four human grading companies that offers a worthwhile guarantee on that. Professor says the word CT scanning is very broad. Not every scanning can achieve 10 micron resolution, et cetera, some technical stuff there. And Justin Bode says, I think the card companies need to consider looking into this totally. I mean, come on, they need to figure out. I agree. They need to figure it out for sure. No doubt. Cage, we should just all break with breakers. They are all above board. And Kevin Hawthorne from Lakeland, Florida is with us. All right, let's change it up for a minute here because I want to talk a bit about something that Carvin, you and I were chatting about, and I think Brent's a good guy to have on. I definitely Joe as well. The hobby right now, and Brent, you love a lot of these 90s cards, whether it's essential credentials or jambalayas, PMGs, rubies. These are cards that have really left their mark on the hobby and the hobby that as it is today. And I think a lot of people are often wondering, what's going to be the next PMG, the next jambalaya? And, Carvin, I want to start with you on this one. How do you feel that the Paninis, Topses, and Upper Decks have been doing over the past 5-10 years to figure out what is going to be the next thing? Or do they need to keep on going back to the well and keep on issuing new versions of jambalayas, PMGs? Panini Tops obviously can't make those, but they have their own, whether it's refractors, and Panini has got the Prism Golds and the Downtowns and the Kabooms. Let's just start with Panini. Has Panini presented the hobby with the next PMG, the next jambalaya, the next essential credentials, in your opinion, Carvin? And then we'll go to Brent.
Well, I think if you look at all these products, you got to identify which products are for who. You got to look at ultimately the demographics that buy that product, right? What is the target for? And at the end of the day, if it's about refractors or if it's about autographs or it's about memorabilia cards, that is part of that lineage of that brand. So you got to focus on that. But also, you also got to create something new. One of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people is that it seems like there's a lack of innovation, right, these days, and new ideas. Like we're going back to the well over and over again, the same type of idea. Oh, let's change a color. Let's do animal prints as parallels. Why does it have to be a parallel? Or how many different variations are you going to do? Or you go from white color to yellow color to purple to speckle to all this stuff, and is it too much? We hear this all the time. Is it too many parallels? You of all people, Jeremy, you were complaining about artifacts when I did so many different, patch versus jersey and dual jerseys, a triple jersey and a patch, and you were like, oh my God, Carvin, as a player collector, you're killing me. Well, look at it today. You can hit like over 100 101s in one single product of one player, right? So you have to find a way to attract people outside of that. Now, I think the card companies have done some good jobs, like Color Blasts, or let's say the anime or a manga, right? But what we're also seeing is that we're seeing if one company does one thing, then all the companies are doing the same thing. You got to find your own road and stop going back to the same thing over and over and over again. How many more PMG greens of the same character that we have, or going back to that retro design? You have Gene at Upper Deck. Let's create something new. Like, why is there no PMG championship precious metal gems, right? And don't create a product that's overloaded with so much in there that people dump these cards too. You got to be careful. The equation of the balance of ROI versus the product itself, the more you provide, the more content you put into a product, the less the secondary market, because everyone's just boatloads of stuff, right? I call it the buffet mentality. I walk into a nice buffet and I feel like, oh man, I got to try everything, right? And at the end of the whole time, when I open a box of cards and I have stacks and stacks of all these parallels or inserts and everything, then it's like, oh my God, I just ate too much, right? And I almost want to just throw up and not go to the buffet again. Well, same thing happens when you open a box of cards and you have 100 different inserts. You're like, that's a lot of listing now, or a lot of packaging, or put into top loads and try to offload them, whether you're on, check out my cards, or you're on eBay and all that. Now, some people enjoy that type of grind. It's not for everyone. For me, I just look at it as like, there's a ton of work here. So I get that almost feeling like, oh, what did I do? Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, you have to create a positive experience for everyone. Right. So card aesthetics are really important. Don't go back to the same aesthetics year after year. Right. And that's just too much. And make it impactful. So
your comment about artifacts, I remember we were sitting in a conference room at the Sport Card Expo in Toronto back in probably 2004, maybe.
Yeah.
And you on behalf of Upper Deck, I remember Chris Carlin was there, a couple other guys, and you called to me. You kind of tapped the shoulder of a few collectors. I was among them, and I remember complaining to you about too many parallels, and I remember your response to me. I remember you. I think what you actually said to the whole group was, you said something like, well, and then you have a collector like Jeremy Lee over there who wants to collect every Dale Howard Chuck parallel that he can. I'm thinking to myself, no, that's not what I want to do, Carvin. That's not. And I think I mentioned it to you. I didn't want to call you out in front of the group. I mentioned to you privately after. And now I'm kind of wishing that I could have talked to the people who were going to be Panini 10 years later and said, hey, don't go do this. But listen, it's obviously been good for their business. And really, these are all profit-oriented companies. Let's go to Brent now for a second. Brent, your thoughts on what Carvin said. I know you like these 90s inserts. I see your posts on Instagram. And also want to get your thought. I'm going to table that. Just take a quick note so I don't forget. Respond to that, Brent. Do you think the companies are doing well nowadays to come up with what 20 years from now people will look back on and say, oh, I got to chase that Color Blast or that downtown or whatever, what have you? Do you think they're doing a good job of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple people posted on here about the debut patches, for example. Like, that to me is something that's not being talked about, which I think is so important about the debut patches being important. Is in baseball, it's been difficult to break baseball because the chase is always first Bowman. And so when you're breaking new releases of Bowman, you see breakers, they have to tell people who the chase is because we don't know. These guys are like 17 years old, 18 years old. You're kind of breaking current product, having no clue who the chase is. And then you find out 3 to 5 years later who the actual chase is. Now, for the first time in baseball in a long time, we're breaking product where you're able to pull a chase card that's a rookie card. So in baseball, first Bowman autos have been king, and there's been really like second place has been way lower. And now I think it's super interesting that we can now finally break baseball, and you know who the chase is, like the Paul Skeens chase. Like we haven't had that in baseball for years, because when Soto was in first Bowman, it was in 2016. Nobody knew who he was. When Vlad was in 2016, or whoever it is, right? Julio in 2019, people didn't really know who these guys were. And so you're breaking Bowman, or you take a box of Bowman home to your son, and you're kind of opening, you might get a gold first auto, and you just like have no idea who these people are. And then down the road, you might get lucky and maybe they're great. The importance of the debut patch is now you're able to break baseball and have a chase that's a rookie card and they're already established. That's why you're seeing, there's so many chase cards for debut patches. But that's just to address that, because I thought that was interesting. Multiple people talked about that. The other thing I'm focusing on more is time period. So yeah, I do like select 90s, PMGs. If it's a guy that I think is undervalued, like a Shaq, or if it's a green football PMG, because I think those are undervalued because, there's distress in the market and people are unsure of it. And I see an opportunity there, and I love that space. But I wrote down a few things. So I think about it more like early 2000s. I think there's opportunity. You're talking about like, what's the next PMG? I look at it more like how to get it ahead of future nostalgia. So early 2000s, Exquisite, 2003, there's great cards in there that were innovative. 2003 Topps Chrome was the first year of gold, refractors to 50. Like that was really innovative. I mean, we can easily say now like, oh, it's boring. But to me, that's really cool. I love the fact that you can get a gold Dwayne Wade 03 Topps Chrome, and it's an amazing card, or a LeBron 03. And then I put down like some trends that I think too, as far as, instead of thinking like, what's the next PMG, think about like time period, 2000s, early to late 2000s. Another trend I'm seeing is grail cards of non-GOATs. So guys that are maybe second and third tier players, because of the fact that there's parallels, because of the fact that in the 2000s, we started getting so many great RPAs, you're able now to get like a second or third tier player, but get the grail card of that guy that's super limited. That's a Logo Man rookie patch auto. That's an NFL Shield patch auto. You're able to target that. And then the other thing I wrote down is football. So there's a shift there. You can make fun of people all you want about comparing basketball to football and prices. I don't really care about that as much, but I am just noticing a shift of people pursuing team collecting in football. You see it on Instagram, like some of the most diehard collectors are football card collectors. And so early 2000s and 2000 sets for those are incredible sets. And I think Prism has done a great job. You look at 2012, Black Finites are one of the hottest cards in the market right now. That's innovative. It's a 1-of-1 Black Finite refractor. Like that, how is that not innovative? We didn't have that in the 90s. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. I think there's a lot of cool stuff. Maybe we're getting kind of tired of Prism because it's, going on 14 years, 12 years, whatever it is now. Like, okay, sure. But when Prism came out, there's a Prism Gold to 10. I mean, that was innovative. When there's a Black Finite to 1, like that's innovative. So I think people, I get a little cautious though, because I do see a strong trend, a strong group think around like, we got to get these great Grail Panini cards now because it's kind of the end. And I'm sure in the 90s, people weren't doing that about PNGs, so like there is a difference there. Like right now, there's a lot of interest and focus and investment, myself included, around these cards that there probably wasn't in the 90s for PMGs. In fact, it sounds like they weren't that collectible. I wasn't collecting in the late 90s. I kind of fizzled out. I collected late 80s, early 90s, and then, played high school football and chased girls and did all that kind of stuff. But,
I will say the greens were highly collectible throughout the whole time. The PMGs have always been collectible because there's only the 1 year PMGs. So there was a store called Red and Blue at the National back in the 90s and 2000. And it was all PMGs and all Michael Jordan rare autographs. So it was always at a high level. I think everyone knew that the Kobe's and the Jordans would go for a lot of money. If you look at talk to David Chow, Shanghai card collector, he'll tell you that those were all Grail cards back in the day. Yeah. But however, it's the common cards and the semi-stars that now have, all tides raise all boats, right? So they were highly collectible.
Like a Black Finite to me now would be similar. Like that's a Grail card. That's
right.
You can get a second and third tier player. That's a Black Finite. And then you notice a lot of guys are player collectors and team collectors. in football. So if a black finite comes up of any relevant player and you're a team collector or a player collector of football, I don't know how you could not get that card. Like that's like the grail card. It's like a Gem Masters in the 90s. So I think there's options out there and there's opportunities, and I have fun in it. There's so many lanes you can play in. I see a guy says I'm clueless, so that's always interesting. I'm always learning. I love when someone says, can you put in there what exactly it is that I'm clueless about, so maybe I can learn tonight.
That's a good approach, Brent, and I appreciate your humility and kind of just being funny about it. Joe, you've been listening to all this talk about these things, and by the way, I just want to acknowledge we do have Josh Adams in the back. Josh, we'll bring you on shortly. Hang tight. But Joe, you've been listening to this, as have I, and really what I'm trying to understand is, and you've been in the hobby the whole time, like, what do you think as far as the recent inserts that are coming out? We started talking about this, and Brent brought up the debut patch because there were some comments in the chat. Those are one of ones. Those are commemorative cards. Those are to me different, as you went on to say, Brent. But Joe, what are your thoughts on and I know you like your Panini product. You like collecting your modern Golden State Warriors and that. So how do you think that Panini specifically has done coming up with these concepts, the Color Blast, etc., to the Kabooms, the Downtowns, to try to recreate what was done back in the 90s by, the Gene McLeod Arena Design, Gene and Earl from Arena Design? Did they do a good job in your opinion? And I say that with the undertext or the subtext that, a lot of those are one and dones, whereas everything else I just mentioned are done year after year. So they didn't do a good job of it, in my opinion. But if you just look at the card, isolate the card itself, Joe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, not to parrot too much with what Carvin and Brent said. I mean, they said different things, but I agree with a lot of what they said. I mean, I think they would do well to get a little more innovative and start developing some ideas. But there's also some aspects that have been highly successful, and I think I've stopped opening wax, and I even though I've been in the hobby all along, it was really around 2019, kind of the Zion, Ja Morant class that came in, where I got excited about opening wax, and that lasted about 2 or 3 years, at which point the prices got so high that I kind of threw in the towel on that, because I didn't feel like there was a value proposition there for me anymore. So I look for, sure, like, Kevon Looney, Black Finite, or, off tier players. You can't really, afford necessarily the GOATs in that regard. But my thought on this in a macro sense, Jay Lee, is I think a lot of us, myself included, have gotten caught up in the idea of what is going to be valued later from a financial standpoint, as opposed to what do collectors want to have in their collection. And so I look at it, I try and think about it from that angle, and not to get collect what you like, but really to think about the overall ecosystem of the world of cards, and to think to yourself, do I feel strongly about this card because I think it's going to have a financial incentive, or do I feel like I want to own this card because it's great to have, to be able to look at it, to feel like it belongs in a collection, it matters in a collection. And if that's the case, I want to believe, and I do believe, that other collectors are going to feel that, and that's going to create the value. Not, we've all decided that kabooms are valuable. Well, frankly, I don't really like the looks of kabooms. I like color blasts, but I don't like kabooms that much. So, I don't own a kaboom, but I've thought about buying them because I get a little FOMO from time to time and think that, maybe I need to have this in my collection. Maybe I need to have this represented. What am I doing? Did I miss the boat? But I would kind of invite everyone in the hobby to do a little bit more creative thinking, and hopefully be collectors, not just investors thinking about what's going to profit me down the road.
Yeah. Does anybody? I have had this thought a lot lately because I'm sure I've been this for other people, but I do pay attention to who's buying what cards. And when I see enough of certain types of people buying certain types of cards, it does concern me. And I've probably been one of those people for other people, which is pretty funny. But a question for Carvin too, real quick, is someone made a comment about adults cornering the market, for modern cards, and say Black Finite, use an example. It's my understanding in 2003, 2004 that people were doing that with Exquisite also. Weren't people going and buying Exquisite cases in boxes in 2003, 2004 that were adults that had money that were looking at as an investment also? Wasn't that similar?
Well, the one thing that when I create products, I love seeing people open products, and you'll be shocked at the amount of collectors that would buy 100 cases and open it all. That's what was happening with Exquisite and Cup Hockey. I mean, I know Jeremy knows a bunch of the Cup collectors that open like 100 cases at a time, and I know
Well,
like three of those.
I don't mean not opening it. I just mean
Most people like. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. There are people that collected cases and put them away, but the whole idea was for us as card people that created the cards. We want to see people have that experience. The whole thing about I would be rewind like 10 years ago. I'm all for breakers because at that time the hobby was not at the level it is today. Cases were available everywhere. It was a much more lower price than it is today. It was easy for people to get into a break for like $30, $50 to $100, and then everyone joined in for a break. And then the movement of cases, there was a ton of cases being moved through these OG breakers now. But now you move to today, and it's almost like it's the whole dopamine hit. And I'm tired of the dopamine hit in our business today. I rather when people want to open products, I want the full experience. It's like going to. I was telling this to Jeremy. It's like going to fine dining, right? We'll go there for the ambience. We have an appetizer or wine and everything. And imagine if you go into a fine dining and everything's served on paper plates and plastic cups. How does that take away from the experience? Well, that's what we're getting right now with all this dopamine hits, like constantly, okay, rip open another case, rip open another case. Oh, I'll buy a repack. And it's just constantly searching for that magical hit to kind of pay off all your bills, or that lottery hit. That's what it has become now, the business. Whereas when you build the experience, like you look at the packaging, you look at the base card, you look at everything. Not everything has to be a one-on-one that has value. I think, PMGs, there's no one-on-ones of PMGs. So why do we have to go to that level? Right? Kabooms have green ones and gold ones. Why does it have that level? Make them rare and don't have that level. You don't need to. People were still chasing them. Once you create that one-on-one, then it kind of devalues everything else. But a gold collector like a Nat Turner or a Spiritron, now they want the one-on-one. So
one-on-ones.
Exquisite had very little one-on-ones if you look at it. There's no parallel of number pieces. There's no rookie patch RPAs that are number one-on-ones. There's none of those. The whole purpose of why I didn't include a Shield rookie card, or let's say a Logo Man rookie card in Exquisite, was that it was an ultimate. I want people to have experiences across the board in the portfolio of products that we offer. That's why I said maintain a certain amount of hits under certain lineage of brands, and not every single brand has to have an RPA. Now, my definition of RPA is different. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Let's bring on Josh. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stop there for a moment, and we're gonna do a swap out. So, Carv, you are welcome to stick around in the back and maybe pop back on later when on the show if you want, if it works out. But if not, thanks for coming on. I got a ton of comments I do want to get to. There's some great stuff in the chat. You guys are killing it out there. But I want to bring on Josh Adams, Midwest Vintage. And Josh, I hope you've been listening, because I'm going to want to get your take on what you've been hearing, because you've been in the hobby almost as long as I have, I think. So, Carvin, thank you. Great to have you back on the show. It's been way too long, but if you want to stick around and come back in about an hour or whatever it may be, stick around in the back, and hopefully we can get you back on.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Nice meeting you, Brent.
Yep.
All right. Josh, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go. All right, he's giving me a thumbs up. Let Carvin. We're gonna take Carvin out. We're gonna bring on Josh. There he is. What's going on? How are you, man?
Hey, Jeremy, Joe, Brent. How you guys doing?
Hey, Josh.
Doing good.
I missed the last 10 minutes. Can you give me a recap of the whole thing? I'm kidding.
I'm not gonna give you a recap. But what I am gonna do is I'm gonna go through some comments now, and we will let's hear from the chat because we got some good stuff here. Justin Bode had said, I think Upper Deck did a good job with the 1-of-1 Young Gun, but man, do they print cardboard? They do. Cage, ask Carvin. Oh, okay. Sorry, Cage. We're gonna save that for when Carvin comes back. And Carvin, I think you're still there, so I want to get you to answer that. Matthew says, I think the debut patch is a good representation of the future. Combination of memorabilia, having provenance, easy for fanatics with autographs. That's my bet. I think it's a great idea as well. Matt Chapman, debut patches are amazing. You hold in your hand a piece of life-changing moment for the individual. You can literally be a minute part of a life-changing moment. I think they're cool too. We have some other opinions coming up. Jeffrey Hart says, I can see winning redemption once in a lifetime experience as being a thing soon versus just getting cards, something that Fanatics is uniquely qualified to pull off. I can see that too, but I don't know. Call me crazy. I just want cards. Personally, I just want cards. Yeah. Matt Chapman, at least you know the date of the patch. I agree. Hobby with Cage. We have had so much innovation in the hobby. Big League has a card of Jeff Wilson. Damn it. The future is now. Card Future said Paul Skeens won't hold up. Debut patches is 1 card per player ever, which I think that's an amazing part about it right there for sure. Cage says he'll take one of those Topps cards, but only if Jeremy gets one too. That would, I'll admit, that would be pretty cool. Chris C, debut, but I doubt it's going to happen for me. Chris C says debut patches. There are too many of them though. Over 200 is just too many. That is too much of a good thing. I don't agree with that, Chris. I think 1 per player is not too much of a good thing. I think, hundreds of a player year after year, or even a couple of a player every year is too many, but a debut patch can only happen once, and there's only one. So, and to say that 200 is too many, so how do you decide what players don't get them? And then if you miss a player who 20 years later or 5 years later becomes really good, then that was a missed opportunity. So that, no one wants that to happen. Vintage card collectors Parallels are rerunning the same inserts year after year. It's like movie sequels, less expensive, time consuming, and risky than coming up with new. So he's actually saying, redoing these same inserts year after year is a cost-effective way for the card companies to do them. It is, but I think it impairs the value and the attractiveness of the ones that came before them. In certain cases, Card Fuchsia says PMGs have always been hot. Irving says we should see some dupe. We should see some dupe in inserts as some workers from one company are now in the new company and all the stuff looks redone. Example, home field advantage. That's a good point. Justin Bode, I can't wait for these new kids to chase girls and come back down the road. Jeff's card journey here said Panini copied everything from Pacific. So there's something right there too. Mid-Atlantic, all this romanticizing about 90s cards. I must be the only person missing the simplicity of 80s cards. I believe an 84 Donruss Mattingly will survive the test of time over the Speckle Zebra number to 10. Hard to disagree with that for me. Okay, let's just stop right there for a moment. Josh.
All right, so Carvin's a hard act to follow. I will say, though, that Exquisite was $500 a box when it came out, and that was 2003. Kids were not buying that.
No, you're right.
Yeah, so I remember at my card shop, I would come by after school, and they would be cracking it open. I'd be buying my, hoops or whatever they had for $1. That's all I had.
And here, Card Fuchsia, and we talked about this already. He says adults have always cornered the market. I remember, I owned a card shop 1991 to 94. And I remember I had adults coming in with their nine pocket pages in their binders, and they wanted to fill up one whole page with one player's Young Gun rookie. They wanted a page of each. So they weren't, back then, 9 out of 500,000 isn't cornering the market, but it's that same mentality. They thought they were investing in the future by buying up tons of cards that ended up being called from the junk wax era. And that didn't work out. So I think one of the questions really these days is, the junk wax era stands alone back when it occurred, but there's this new era, commonly referred to often as either, ultra modern or the junk slab era or whatever people are calling it. That's a whole other.
Yeah, I've heard stories in 2003, 2004 when Exquisite was launched, guys, on Wall Street going to card shops and buying Exquisite boxes chasing LeBron. So it kind of feels like that was actually the shift in cards and looking at it as an investment, and these like high ticket items, these expensive packs was exquisite.
It was, yeah. I mean, and then the cup came out and it did the same thing. Yeah. And sorry, I was sort of focusing on comments for a sec there, Brent, so I didn't hear all that, but I didn't process it all. But any response, Joe or Josh, to that comment before we go to some more from the chat?
No, I think it's spot on.
Spot on. Okay.
Big moment.
Good. Well, here's one. I want to read this. Nick Leach said, at the end of the day, iconic cards are what matter 20 years ago, now, and 25 years from now. So all encompassing. He says, I'm interested to see what happens with these 90s insert parallels once 90s kids aren't buying them anymore. That's an interesting question right there. An interesting thing to consider. Let's go to you, Josh. I mean,
well, you know, people, no one's alive today that saw Babe Ruth or Honus Wagner or Willie Mays play, and Mickey Mantle, but people still buy his stuff. So I think people are still going to buy Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal and Ken Griffey Jr. and Nolan Ryan, 20, 30 years later, just because of their status in each sport. Like Wayne Gretzky's never gonna lose luster, no matter, even if Ovi beats the record, Gretzky's still gonna be the great one no matter what. People are always gonna collect them. So I think it's just, each generation has their own nostalgia based on what they see and what they remember collecting. I remember going to shows in '93 and buying '93 Topps Chrome, or whatever it was called, Topps Finest, not Chrome, Finest, trying to find refractors. And that was a lot of nostalgia. I love collecting those cards today still because of that. So I think there's a lot of people like me who also do that. And so that's kind of my thought on it.
And Josh, Josh, I got to get you to do this, Brent, too. But Josh, tell people, where are you? Where are you located? And then, you just talked about you've been in the hobby since '93, but where are you? You're in Chicago?
I'm in the Chicagoland area. I've been, collecting since the '80s, but '93 I was 15 and was going to card shows on my own, and that was when Finest came out and it was pretty popular. It was really popular. But someone mentioned 84 Donruss. 84 Topps was my first packs I remember buying. Those were great. Mattingly and the Strawberry were the big chase cards that year.
And you're also with 90s auction. So the question that Nick Leach says, which is, again, what's going to happen when 90s kids, that's all of us, aren't buying cards from the 90s anymore? That impacts you because you have an auction company called 90s. Guys, check out his auction company, 90sauctions.com. We do a show together to profile the items in the auction. And so please check that out. Josh would definitely appreciate it. And his partner, John, and these guys are curating nice auctions. How many times a year are you doing them, Josh?
Four auctions a year every quarter. So this will be our fourth quarter.
When does this next one go live?
Tomorrow at noon. And
perfect.
And then we go through January 5th.
So guys, check out 90sauctions.com. But back to this whole thing, about what's going to happen to the 90s cards. And Josh, I think you were spot on when you said, you mentioned Babe Ruth, you mentioned all these legends, Mickey Mantle, Wayne Gretzky. The one thing is that history doesn't go away.
Right.
It's always studied. People are always interested in it, and there's just always more of it, but because there's more time behind us, but there's also the more ability to research it. Now you can watch YouTube from things that occurred from before YouTube was a thing, because everything's on YouTube now. The internet just provides you with so much that if you want to research all the Hall of Famers going back to the beginning of time, you can do that. So, I think that the 90s is one of these eras that is going to it's going to persist. It's going to be a going concern for I don't know how many generations, but a couple more. I think that's the case. Josh, what do you think?
I agree. Well, I hope so, but yeah, I definitely agree that cards in the 90s, PMGs, Rubies, Legacy, all the, well-known issues are still going to be popular. They were new for the time, the 80s had great, cardboard, but the 90s had this technological innovation and revolution. And I think it will sticks with people because it was so innovative and unique. Die cut, acetate, foil, all the cool stuff that's still being used today started then. And there's a reason they're still using it. I don't do a lot of modern stuff, but I see that, scrolling through my feed.
Brent, tell everybody where you are and sort of what you do in the hobby these days.
Yeah, I'm in Kirkland, Washington, which is outside of Seattle, Washington, on Lake Washington. So it's the beautiful Pacific Northwest. and I'm working for Fanatics Collect, and been in the hobby for about 4 or 5 years now. Collected in the late 80s, early 90s as a kid, got out of the hobby, got back in. I actually disagree about the 84 Mattingly. I collected that stuff as a kid, and I love the complexity of serial numbered cards. I love the complexity of all the differentiation in cards and patches and autos and different sets. And to me, it's just, I don't know, it's so thought provoking now, and it's so intellectually interesting to me to always be seeing all the different sets and trying to come up with a strategy around collecting, that thinking about my childhood and just opening 89 Upper Deck again, like just I used to open that up, and you'd open up boxes, and it's just the same cards over and over and over again, and you're just kind of like arguing about if your corners are better than somebody else's corners. And that was kind of like the only complexity. There's one guy, maybe two guys you're interested in getting. And so I love the fact that there's so much complexity. The more complexity, the better for me. When I was listening to a podcast a week or two ago on Patrick Bet-David, and he had a guy on that's a watch dealer. And hearing him talking about watches was really making me think about the current hobby right now, because there was so much complexity. There were so many different types of watches. It was like, how do you know which ones are real, which variations, which models? There's 37 different models of 1 year that was only printed or made to 50. And there's just so much complexity that it had me so fascinated, because that guy has built up so much knowledge now that he's like, guys don't buy watches, they buy the dealer. And so I love that about the hobby now. I love the fact that there's so much, the more complexity, the better, because I think it's just even more interesting to me.
Josh, please reply.
No, I think that I agree. I think that's pretty cool. I didn't know about that about watches. I have an old watch that's broken. I need to get a new battery, but I haven't bought a new watch in 30 years. But that's cool. Like I never knew that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it had me thinking about it. So it's easy to look back now, but it had me thinking about, I'm listening to this guy talking about watches, and if I were new into watches, which I am, I have no idea what he's talking about, half this stuff. And so it had me thinking about 2025 and wanting to spend more time focusing on like helping collectors, helping educate collectors, not making an assumption that everybody understands the complexities of the modern hobby. Because, and when I say modern, I just mean serial number cards, say late 90s and on. Because I meet guys all the time that have a lot of money, and I can tell the cards that they were buying before they met me and started working with me. And I can tell the cards that they started buying after they started working with me. Like there's no more sticker autos and pink pulsars of this guy and this modern player. And all of a sudden you see their collection shifting. And I find that really rewarding. I find it fun to help guys when they start sending me, hey, what do you think of this card? What do you think of that card? Which card should I sell now? Which card should I buy now? I just love it, man. It's like being a portfolio advisor, but for sports cards. And there's so much complexity that I encourage everybody to listen to that podcast. It's I'm forgetting the guy's name, but it's just a couple of weeks ago on Patrick Bet-David, and it was about watches. You guys will all be like, your wheels will be spinning about the current hobby in sports cards right now. And he collects a little bit too, he even said. And Patrick Bet-David's the one that made the $19 million offer for a mantle and got some publicity, and he's part owner of the Yankees. So
Joe, I think you were going to jump in before. Go ahead.
No, I guess, I liked what Brent was saying about, strategies and, the research involved in developing strategies. Our friend Hoj, is coming on later. He and we both like select basketball. And so, researching the moment at which select kind of moved from maybe three black, the shimmer, the pure, and the finite or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden it kind of went to 6. I think it was like 2020 or something, but just finding those moments where there might be shifts and where you might be able to feel like, okay, this is more rare in comparison to even the very next year, just because there's fewer. There's not the exact same card, but maybe fewer of that type. And, those are the kind of rabbit holes I like going down, even though I'm not always very good at it, but, going into card connection and looking at the old, the checklists and kind of seeing how they developed the product. You can learn a lot, and you can find some targets, and that is one of the fun things of collecting.
Yeah, I think about like, I some people will give me crap, as an investor, or say I'm just an investor, and that's fine. And you guys can give me as much crap as you want, and I actually enjoy it. I don't expect everybody to agree with me or collect the same way I do. But I think that this complexity and talking about the watches and cards, it's intellectually stimulating. Like it's fun. There's 1,000 other things I could be doing to collect or try to make money. There's a reason why sports cards, because I love sports cards. Like I choose to collect sports cards. If you're in your 40s and you're buying and selling or collecting sports cards or whatever, like that's such a small percentage of America that's doing that. If you're going to be in here for more than 6 or 12 months, like you got to have some sort of love for sports, love for cards, like nostalgia for it. So I can call myself an investor. And I think really what I mean most of the time is I love being super strategic around what I collect versus just say being a player collector, because I live in Seattle. So I'm going to collect Ken Griffey and I'm going to buy every single Ken Griffey junior card I ever see. Like, that's just not how I collect. I love the strategy. I love the nuances. When I first got in, I didn't know the difference between a sticker auto and a non-sticker auto. And now I'll never even buy a sticker auto. So it's like, I didn't know the difference between green PMG football and basketball. And like, there's just so much that I love about learning, and it's intellectually stimulating, along with loving cards as a kid, along with loving sports, along with loving, I want to make money on a card. I don't want to lose money on a card, or, break even, or maybe lose a little bit. It's not that important to me. It's not how I make a living, but there's just a part of me that I don't want to spend a lot of money on something knowing it's going to zero, whatever it is. Like, it's just not fun for me. So I'd rather be strategic and buy something that I can enjoy and hope it doesn't go to zero, and have an investment thought process around it. And so that's what I love to share with people.
There's nothing wrong with that. And that's my approach too, Brent, is, whenever the price of the card passes a certain threshold where I'm like, okay, this is significant money, it has to make sense. I have to have a good feeling about what's going to happen when I ultimately exit that card. Okay, Brent, we're going to let you go. Thank you for joining. Good to see you, man. And we'll see you again back here in the future.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. We're going to run through some comments now. Hopefully we can address some of them here as well. First of all, Diamond Card Collector, loves sports cards. Hope everyone's doing well. Enjoying the combo. Diamond, good to see you. As always, Chris from CRT Sports Cards says, come over here, collect pre-war. You don't have to learn all these fancy words. Matthew Chapman, I think breakers need to slow down and have a better experience talking about the cards. All they do is rush through, and I'm like, crap, another 1,000 spent and forgot what I paid for. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Josh? What do you think of that comment there? Do you watch breakers very often?
I don't. I think I've ever seen a breaker. Yeah,
Okay.
no. But the guy who said do pre-war is 100% right, because Dusty never goes out of style. Although I will tell you, there are so many different issues in pre-war cards. When Brent's talking about research and PMGs and all this other stuff, I mean, look at the American card catalog. They have A cards, C cards, E cards, D cards, T cards. It'll blow your mind. You could go down a rabbit hole for years and not know anything.
There's so much. What you're saying is there's so much to learn about cards from all eras.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why it's such
The
great.
80s,
This thing about is great. Go on, sorry.
The 80s were a little bit kind of templated, if you will. So, but hey, I grew up in that. I grew up loving that. So you're not going to ever get me off of that. Mid-Atlantic said, sets now are nothing but stars and rookies. There's something to be said for a 792 card set where you actually learn the players and the teams top to bottom. I mean, that's what I came from as well. Signed and slabbed. At some point, the 8th, 9th year of a player's 1/1 means what exactly? Or how about the 27th, 28th year after they've retired? That's interesting. That comes down to the whole playing days thing. And now some people might want the 1/1 of a player from every year, the black card, the golden treasures, the superfractors, and these sorts of things. But I guess the question there is, do they lose their allure as more and more of them come out? Josh, what do you think?
Oh, well, yeah, but I think also we have a friend of ours that likes to buy, Babe Ruth's first 1/1 superfractor, and we always make fun of him for that. But there's it's cool, and it introduces kids to pre-war cards too, right? Like Like, oh, who's Josh Gibson? Who's Christy Mathewson?
Right.
So, I think that's good. Exposure to all areas of the hobby are good. I think in Instagram, we get caught in a bubble that there's basketball and then maybe some other stuff.
What do you think, Joe, about these way post rookie year, that way into a player's career? Is a one of one still meaningful for a player 8th, 9th year in, or 28 years after they retire?
Yes and no. I agree with Josh that it's kind of nice to feel like other people are getting exposure that they might not otherwise get. You read the back of the card, you might get interested, you might get hooked on, Christy Mathewson. Yeah. The thing that's coming up for me right now too is like the rules. I've been a very flighty collector, an impulsive collector, not a diligent, intentional, sort of focused collector. And sometimes I wish I was more. And I am starting to do, a few more self-imposed rules when I feel like it, and by rules, I mean, Brent was mentioning the sticker versus on card. Like, okay, that might be a good rule to follow. For myself, though, I'll set that rule and then I'll see a sticker card that I actually like and want to own. But I know people out there and I respect them. And maybe you're one of them, Josh. I don't know. Jeremy, you're pretty good at holding the line with this. This is something I'm good with, and then being a little more impulsive. But yeah, I wish I was a little better sometimes. But it's kind of an interesting thing to me to think about how we start to narrow down our scope of what we will entertain. I mean, we can appreciate everything, but what we want to bring into our collection and the rules that we sort of maybe use to help us refine what it is that we're focusing on.
Yeah, well said. Okay, a couple more comments here, and then we're going to bring Iowa Dave on. Can't wait to hear where he's from. Timepiece Esquire says, "Hey, it's my birthday, Jeremy. I just got back from Disneyland Fun Day with the family at the most magical place on earth. On another note, how amazing is Macklin Celebrini?" Yeah, I think he's better than Connor Bedard for now, at least. Timepiece goes on to say 90s kids are never going to stop buying 90s cards. You know why? Because as each day passes, the more money we get. More money in our pocket equals more money we can spend on 90s cards. Stop fighting it. Love the 90s. Matt Chapman says, I think the amount of content out there talking about the same 90s cards the kids are watching, remembering, and are going to want to collect them. It's an interesting perspective. I can see some validity to that. And David Spinrad, the rated rabbi, is here, says, I love the learning. Yes, that's great. Glad to have you, David, in the chat, and looking forward to having David. Will be on the show in January. We've already kind of narrowed it down to a few different nights. Okay, guys, we are going to go ahead. Josh, we're going to bring on David, Iowa Dave Schwartz. You ready to go, Dave? Give me a thumbs up. He's good to go. Dave Schwartz, welcome to Sports Cards Live. Dave, how are you?
It's great to see you, Jeremy, Joe, Josh. Nice to meet you.
Hey, Dave. Nice to meet you.
Good to have you. Good to have you, Dave. And I'm excited because we're going to change the topic. We're going to kind of reset the comments here, and we're going to change the topic, Dave, because first of all, where are you? What do you do in the hobby? Let everybody learn a bit about you.
Sure. Iowa Dave. I'm in Iowa. I live in Iowa City, where the University of Iowa is. I don't do much in the hobby except collect. I was hard into the hobby from about 83 until 91, and then got back in during COVID. Now I collect, and now I have a podcast called The Shallow End that comes out every Friday.
The Shallow End, guys, comes out every Friday. Check it out. Subscribe to Dave's podcast. It's one of the ones that I listen to regularly, and I got to listen to myself on the podcast just a couple weeks ago because Dave did a he's a very, trust me, once you get into listening to Dave's podcast, you don't really stop, because Dave, you really take an approach, like a meticulous approach to it. You put so much effort and thought into it. And one of the things that you just did, you just came off of doing a run of 27 podcasts on 27 consecutive days in November. And you called it the 27 decisions, because each guest you had on spoke about a key decision they had to make or they made in the hobby. And I was one of those. My Babe Ruth PSA 1 1933 Gaudi number 144 was the subject. It was like a 15-minute pod, nice and short and consumable. But one of the things I wanted you to talk about, Dave, when you came on here tonight, was based on the experience you had in talking to 27 different people. You must have identified some themes, or maybe lack of themes, but even that is a theme in and of itself. And I want you to share, I think it's some great insights that you might be able to share with us and the audience from those 27 podcasts. So I'm just going to turn it over to you and say, what did you learn? Tell us a bit about the process. Did you enjoy it? Would you do it again? Go ahead, man.
Sure. So the reason I did it in the first place is because I'm fascinated by the decisions that people make in this hobby. And I don't mean whether to buy one card versus another, but I mean when they make big, wild changes to their collections. When they're going one direction, all of a sudden you check back in a year later and they're doing something completely different. What were those moments like? And so I wanted to capture that. And I put out a note on Instagram saying, hey, I'm working on this. If you want to talk, reach out to me. I didn't ask anyone. I said, hey, whoever wants to do it, let's do this. So I ended up talking to 27 different people about decisions they made. And some were around sets, some were around players, some were around not doing anything at all. It was really, really fascinating. So you asked about themes. What kind of things did I hear? Yeah.
Sorry, Dave. I have to interrupt, ask a quick question. Was it 27 because only 27 people responded to you, or did you cut it off at 27?
There were 2 or 3 others who reached out who didn't seem like the right fit. And then once I landed on the 27, realized I wasn't going to do any more. That's why it became the title. So it was no fancy title other than I talked to 27 people. And like I said, there could have been about 30, and there were some I thought this isn't gonna work.
Okay, no, I just wanted to clear that up. I was curious. Okay, so please continue where you were.
Sure. And so you asked about themes, and the big theme I think that I pulled out of all of this, and yet people had different reasons for doing what they were doing. Some were for family, some were for this, some were for that. But the thing that I pulled the most out of it is that collecting is just sort of a broad catch-all term for other reasons people are doing things. Some people collect to remember. Some people collect to honor. Some people collect to organize, to create some sort of order in their life. I was really fascinated by this idea that you'd hear about the people's vocations and their jobs, and it sounds so chaotic. And then wouldn't you know it, what they're doing is they're putting together sets, right? Because they're just trying to time to themselves to sit with their cards, card number 1 through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. And you start realizing that collecting isn't just collecting. There are reasons behind it. There are some that were just cries for help, which is, and there are some that for the most part, people were having fun, but they were doing it to call back to their childhood or to connect with their kids in a different way or to connect with their family. So there's always something behind the collecting. And yeah, sometimes it's money, and that's great, but there's never just one thing. And it's never just, I like the cards, therefore I want to collect cards. They are finding a more strict motivation behind what they are doing to create some sort of sense of order and how they put their collections together.
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting and I'm glad to get sort of like a collector's perspective from you based on all those conversations that you had. And again, encourage people to go check out the Shallow End podcast and to listen to these various pods. And yeah. Oh, wow. Team S, or to grieve your lost sibling. I mean, there's many reasons why people collect. And Josh, I saw you nodding along with Dave as he was kind of talking about the set collecting. And I mean, listen, you and I, Josh, we love collecting singles from the 90s. But I like earlier, I don't know if anyone else caught this, but Josh said, Dusty never goes out of style. It's in a chat group we're in, we refer to vintage as dust, and it's just kind of tongue in cheek, but we love the dust. But it kind of was, Josh, if you remember, our common friend who came up with that term, he literally makes fun of vintage. He's not a fan of it. Go ahead, jump in.
He's the same guy that bought, Babe Ruth's first superfractor, 80 years after he's dead, but that's the joke. I could relate so much to what Dave just said about collecting for chaos in your regular life, and you want some quiet time. You want to be able to just sit there with your cards and organize them, maybe look at them, and just, it's time to yourself and you can decompress. And it's a hobby. That's the point of the hobby, is not my, real life. it's collecting. I do sets, I do players, and I do specific. I have my focus is no focus, right? I have some sets. I do 48 Leaf, 33 Gaudy. I'll do pre-vintage type cards, and then Frank Thomas and Michael Jordan. So it's all over the place. But I could really relate to that. So I wish I knew about this before you did your podcast.
Dave, before we go back to you, I want to get Joe's perspective, always so thoughtful in terms of what he's hearing on the show from all the guests. Joe, I don't know if you've listened to Dave's podcast. If you happen to listen to one, you have listened to some. So what, now that you've heard from the man himself, what's going through your mind?
Probably just where, my creating meaning or order in collecting lands, in terms of maybe, what underlying psychological reasons might be, which, is personal reflection. And I'd be curious, to listen to the, to all the different decisions that people made. I'm not always someone that makes decisions very easily, so sometimes I'll agonize over them, and it is interesting to kind of hear people's process that they go through when they're faced with a dilemma or option A, option B. But I know for myself, emerging out of educational leadership where you're dealing with angry parents and kids going through trauma, I know a lot of times for me the hobby was just an escape, just something to disassociate from the rigors of academia and looking at kids that are on the verge of getting themselves kicked out of a school or something along those lines. So it's just food for thought is mostly what's going through my mind. What is underlying our impulses?
So Dave, I want to get your thoughts on this because this is very personal to me, but I've often wondered, why do I collect? Why do I covet these cards when I see them? What is really driving me to collect and add to my collection, and has been driving me to do this for, over 40 years now. And I go back to being in grade school, filling out those O-Pee-Chee hockey sticker books, trying to finish off my 84, 85 O-Pee-Chee hockey set, and eventually, 85 Topps football, the black borders. And I remember being young, and I remember, coming from a single parent household for a few years, and, I'd get my $2 a week allowance, and I'd go buy, 8 packs of cards at the corner store. And then I'd go to school the next day, and I'd see other kids that came to school or, took out at recess an unopened full box of 36 packs. And I was like so envious. You get a whole box? I remember the first time someone asked me, hey, you want to split a case? I was like, what do you mean? This was in like 2002. What do you mean split a case? I'd never thought of buying a case of cards, maybe a few packs, maybe a box. Never I was never splitting cases as a collector. And when I had a card shop, we were never selling it by the case. You couldn't. We didn't have enough inventory. So anyway, I remember being envious of these kids and never being able to finish my set first and wanting to finish my set because there was competition even back then just to get the set complete of 396 O-Pee-Chee baseball cards or 762 baseball, 396 hockey, 762 baseball, whatever those numbers were. I know the hockey numbers right for most years, but that's it. Like, I feel like I was competing back in the 80s, and I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder, am I still competing with those kids I went to school in, elementary school who have been out of the hobby for 40 years? Am I still competing with them? Is that what ultimately drives me to collect? Was wanting to keep up with the kids who had more money or whose parents had more money in grade 3, 4, and 5 than mine did? That's kind of what Dave, what do you think when you hear that?
Well, I think only you can answer that. But it is a fascinating question. And when I first started getting back into the hobby, the first card I went for was the one that you talked about a little while ago, which was the 84 Don Russ, Don Mattingly. I remember walking through card shows in St. Louis, where I'm from, and a friend and I would walk by it, and it was this mythical card. And I know that in the 80s, it's now the 89 Upper Deck Griffey, that's the iconic card. But before the Griffey, it was the Mattingly. And we walked by it in the case, and it was $80. Can you imagine? There's no way I could possibly afford that. But when I finally had the means and I finally got back into it, you use the word, are you competing, or are you trying to fulfill something that wasn't there, that you couldn't fulfill before? Right? You're trying to prove that you can get it. Because once I finally got it, I loved it. But then eventually decision time came, and I had to move on to some other cards, and I had to move something. And I didn't really want to move it, but I moved that one because I can get that one back whenever I want if I choose to. So I don't know whether we're still competing with people. It would make sense with the way a lot of people use social media, right? When you're on Instagram, you get a card, and sometimes before the card's even out of the package, it's up on, and you're showing it. And sometimes, I know I sound very judgmental, but sometimes I want to ask people, why are you showing this card? Are you showing it because you want to get the likes? Are you showing it because that you're proud of it, because you're building something? Or are you just showing it because it's like you need sort of that fix of look what I have, look what I have. But there's so many different reasons. And I don't think most people are that way, but I think there certainly are people who are that way. And I've done it myself where I posted a card. I think, why did I post that card right now? Am I posting it right now because it's part of the larger idea that I'm building? And sometimes it is, but there certainly have been times when I posted a card because I just wanted to get the reaction.
Yeah. You said only I could answer that. I don't know if I can. Like, I think I need a therapist to help me answer it because, I just don't know. That might be what got me where I am today, but I don't think I'm not competing with those kids anymore. I mean, I don't even, I might know 4 of them to this day anymore, or not even 4. But maybe that's what planted the seed and got me really going. David Spinrad here, Rated Rabbi, says, in quotes, why do you collect? And listen, I don't want to be I don't want to help you. I don't want to tell you how to do podcasts, Dave. You've been doing a great job on your own, but you just finished the big decision. The why do you collect would be, I think, really interesting to a lot of people. And if you don't do it, maybe someone else out there will. But couple comments from the chat here while we're at it. Victor, the rookie card specialist, is with us. Hello, Victor. Says, wow, that's deep. Great work, Dave. And agree. Dave Spinrad, same thing. Telling people check out the series, the 27 Decisions series. Chris, CRT Sports Card, says, great to see Dave. I would recommend everyone check out his recent series in November. Ben Burrows from Collect says, sounds like a wonderful series. We'll check it out this weekend. Disappointed I hadn't heard about it sooner. Matt Chapman says, collecting calms my brain until 3 seconds later when I realize I also like this other shiny thing right there. Yeah, I think we can all pretty much identify with that. Linda's First says, what Josh is saying about relaxing with his cards is what this show is for me. I take out some of my cards, thumb through them while I watch and chatting. Love it. Oh, that's great to hear. Linda's First, whose real name is Michael. I wish you'd change your name so I could just stop saying that. Change your name on here on YouTube. I'm just kidding. Card Fuchsius. He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in great danger. JW Fulcher says the thrill of owning something rare or limited taps into basic human desires for uniqueness and status. I mean, that's deep and something that a lot of people might not want to admit, but probably true. Carvin Chung, we all want to be the best or part. We all want to be the best or part of the community. Okay, I think we are social animals. We want to be a part of a community for sure. Justin Bode is done. He's done competing with people. He's had enough of it. Ben Burrows, dad got me started collecting as a kid in the early 90s, lost him 10 years ago, and it's a way to keep the connection. Started adding to his Koufax collection again this summer just to keep it going. That's important, guys. That's important. Colin Murray has joined us. Hello, Colin Murray. Currency says attempts to regulate our internal emotional states. So, why we're collecting. Latrell Sprewell, what are your thoughts on grading? Do you think it's a scam? We're just going to ignore that comment for now. It's totally off topic. Chris C says, timing is everything. I was out of the hobby for 17 years. If I hadn't left 90s basketball insert collection, would be my 90s basketball insert collection would be far greater. Why? Jake says, why do you collect? Why do you share what you collect? Great. This came up in a DM I received today. I forget who it was from, but we were talking about is it flexing? The question was, isn't it flexing every time you post a valuable card? Well, I don't know. I mean, what? So we should only post non-valuable cards, so we are not considered to be flexing? I don't know. Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think so at all. I forget who made the comment, but there's a comment back there about we're collecting things like status, and that's talking about like rarity and scarcity and whatnot. That's one of the big ambitions behind going after cards that we perceive as being rare or scarce, because you're part of this exclusive club. And as you were talking before about immaculates and one of ones versus not one of ones and whatever else, I kept thinking about one of ones feel kind of lonely to me, because you don't get to share the experience with anyone. You got it, and congrats, and you get to be at the top of the mountain, and you look around and there's no one to your right and there's no one to your left. You have this card, and maybe someone's jealous of you and maybe not. But when you have a low count card, something out of 10, something out of 20, who knows what, then you get to experience it with someone, and then you have the status, you're part of this exclusive club. And I get it. I get what you all were talking about before when you're talking about, is it worth even having the one of ones, or is it just is the low count enough?
You know what I love, and I've started using a few months ago, the hashtag card bros. Like if someone gets it, if I have the same card as you, we're card bros. And that to me is building a community. Maybe it's an exclusive club of sorts just because we own the same card. And it's not an exclusive club. It's just more like, hey, we already have the collecting of cardboard in common. Now we have specific cards in common as well. And that to me is fun. Josh, what are your thoughts on all this talk that we're going through right now in terms of, flexing by posting and card bros and the exclusivity of one-on-ones?
So I think to start off with that, we all join, I think, social media and meet other collectors because we want to be part of a community. That's the reason we do it. We don't do it because I know a lot of my friends who are collectors don't have social media and just kind of go on their own and have either binders or shoe boxes full of stuff and never share it, and they just do it for themselves. And frankly, it seems kind of lonely to me. I think half the fun too is sharing knowledge and sharing experiences. And like Dave said, you got a card that someone else has too, and talk, maybe it's a 10, 20, 50, and you talk about how you found yours, or the path that you got searching for. To me, searching for the cards like 90% of the fun. The hunt is, to me, the thrill. But as I think, one-on-ones are lonely because no one else has one. It's like, okay, that's cool. But also for me, I don't know, there's like an intellectual disparity with one-of-ones because all the differences is a different color of the card. Like it's the same card, just different color. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to step anyone's toes. I'm not criticizing them for what they collect. But for me, it's not for me. I prefer different types of cards. But that's why this hobby is great, because there's something for everybody. And that's what also makes it very special.
So this makes me think back to the question of like, what about the 7th or 8th year superfractor one-of-one or whatever? It's like, if you're a player collector, you want that superfractor. No, I shouldn't say so generally. Not every player collector does. But I think for me, if I'm a player collector, I'd want to pick up that one-of-one of that specific card every year and keep on adding it. Or, maybe there's competition, so you get a few of them. That to me is a valid reason to collect one-of-ones. And why I think that there is some value to that 8th year one-of-one of a player. Not every player, because some players don't have collectors, except for the family sort of thing. But Joe, what do you think of this line of discussion?
Yeah, I was going back a little bit. I do think for me, as I'm reflecting, nobody can answer these questions but yourself, for yourself. And I think there was something about my childhood where, I wasn't raised in an affluent, situation. At various points, we had maybe a Volkswagen that caught on fire there in Berkeley, California, or Carmen Ghia. And I think having something that was that felt special, right? Like that, it kind of elevated my status, even if it was just with myself, just feeling like I had something that maybe other people didn't have. In terms of when I started to collect vintage as a, teenager, 13, 14-year-old going to shows, wow, 57 mantle, like that's a big deal to own. So that's kind of where I was just reflecting on that still.
All right. Okay, good. Appreciate it. Let's go to comments again, guys. Okay. Brett Miles says, regarding posting of cards, I love it when I can read stories that connect to the cards. That's huge for me. It's why I love blogging. Just haven't ventured that over to IG or other socials, whatever is authentic. He then says, flexing does not need to be a negative word. Some feeling comfortable about what you chase and smile for what others land is true hobby enjoyment for me. I think we should all try to be that way. I think that's a great way to be, a great attitude. Brett Yitz is shouting out Josh, a little chef's kiss to Josh from Yitz. Latrell Spreewell, I collect because it's fun to put things together. It also gives me something to do when my kids are finally asleep. Makes good sense. Matt Chapman says sometimes it's to show off. Sometimes it's pure excitement. Most times it's just to be a part of something. Fair. And Linda's First says Josh is right. Card collecting is about the community. It's why card shows are the best medium of the hobby. That makes a lot of sense to me right there. Although I will say, like, the community is huge, obviously, but sometimes the community can get you down, especially if you are focused on too much hobby content at times. And then you can always, you can come back to your cards, and I find they can ground you and make you kind of remember why you're in it for the first place, or not. For some people that might not work. I'm not sure, but okay, guys. Gosh, there's still so much I want to talk about. 3 hours is not a long enough time. We still have an hour to go. Chris Hoge has entered the studio. He's in the back room. We're going to bring him on here shortly.
Bump him.
Go ahead, Josh.
I say bump him. It's fine.
Bump him.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Chris. All right.
Okay. Before we bring Chris on, I do want to ask both Josh and Dave, what concerns do you have for the hobby? Dave, you just finished talking to 27 different people. What concerns do you have, if any, for the hobby moving into 2025? And on the other side of the coin, what assurances do you have? And again, as I mentioned earlier, I had to ask ChatGPT, what's the opposite of a concern? And they said it's an assurance. So, think of it in that context, guys. But Dave, concerns and assurances for 2025 as you see things.
Sure. My concern mostly is just the culture of gambling. It's being more and more, especially as Fanatics takes over more and more things. They've identified that this is the way to really make money. They are a major corporation. They want to go public. This is how you're going to do it. Whether it's breaking, or it's these hits, or it's the tops nows, or whatever else it is. That seems to be where their focus is. And without pearl clutching too much, as more and more young people come into the hobby, I feel like they're going to be going toward Pokemon, which is great. It's not my thing, but it's wonderful. But if it's going to be on the sports card side, the first thing they're going to see, depending on how their introduction takes place, is going to be on going for the big hits, the slot machine effect of it. So I think that's what I'm most concerned about, is that there's no other thing to really see here. This is what's pushed, it's what's promoted, and it's not a new thing, but the degree to which is happening now is just beyond anything I've seen before. I wanted to pull a Griffey 89 Upper Deck when I was collecting Upper Deck in 89, and largely because I knew it was worth a lot. I thought it was cool, but there were other reasons to collect. And now, like, whether you're being bombarded with opportunities and all these things that are games of chance, essentially, that are built into it. And maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll be looking back at 20 years and think I was worried about nothing. But when I look now, the number one thing to entice someone to get into the sports card hobby at this point, if they have not been in it before, is the chance at winning something big.
Yeah. I think that's a legitimate concern. That is the direction the hobby has gone, away from just set collecting. If you're introduced to the hobby through many social media platforms, it is gambling is one of the first things that you do see. Do you have any sort of assurances going into 2025?
I do. It's sort of along the same thing. It's that, I know breakers and shops with allotments are at Fanatics' mercy, but I think that most collectors who are in the hobby right now, they've wisened up. They know what Fanatics is all about. And when you see what's happening now with Bowman Draft and how people are starting to pull away a little bit and starting to look back instead of into the present, I think there's a recognition that there's going to be something that is either going to force Fanatics to change, or they're just not going to play the game. So I feel very optimistic about the current stock of collectors or people who are in this hobby space, because I don't think they are so easily Jedi mind tricked the way that people are who are just coming into it. So I feel really good about our ability to be aware of what is happening.
I love that. I think I'm noticing. I think many collectors are getting smarter about how they're approaching the hobby, and that smarter is really just a function of having more experience, soaking in more information. You know, you come into the hobby, you're going to make mistakes early, but then you realize there's a lot of information out there. I got to figure out who to follow, who to read, who to watch, who to talk to, what LCS, who's my local LCS guy? Does he have my best interest in hand? And I think people are open-minded to that. Josh, let's go over to you. Concerns, assurances going into 2025.
Dave stole my thunder. So I was going to say gambling also, but also kind of an offshoot of that. Just, more adults coming in. We talked about this earlier, about an hour ago. More adults coming in and just kind of cornering it, or, getting too involved. Because the reason we have such nostalgia and such fondness for our cards is we were kids buying this stuff, and packs were somewhat affordable. I think like a skybox or metal might have been $10 or $15 a pack, and that was like unheard of for me. So I was buying like, $1 baseball packs. So that's what I'm concerned, like, is kind of an offshoot of the gambling, is just more adults making it harder for kids to create that sense of nostalgia that will carry them to when they get older and want to continue doing this. Assurances, I'd say there's a lot of great, exciting players in baseball, in hockey, and I think that will, in football. And I think it'll drive kids to want to collect. My kids love football. So they, we go to shows, they look in the dollar bins for Justin Jefferson, Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, none of the Bears, I can't blame them. But so, to me, that gives me a lot of assurance that there's still that collecting bug that I think kids have, and they'll continue to feed that. And I guess as parents, you can like steer them away from the casino like effect of like, Fanatics. So I'll use that as an umbrella term. So that's what I think. And like hockey's got some great stars, some awesome stars. Connor Bedard. There was a little Bedard slander earlier. It's okay, I'll let it pass. And Celebrini's okay, but it's fine.
Thank you for letting that pass. Okay. All right, Josh. Thank you for coming on right now. If you wanna hang out in the back,
yes,
we can maybe bring you back in a little bit later.
I'll hang out.
And I know you want to share the screen with Hoj, but you can't do that yet. So
fine. I got you. All right.
Thanks, buddy. All right. Well, hopefully we'll bring Josh back. Chris Hoj, you ready to come on? He's good. There he is, everybody. Let's welcome none other than Chris McGill, Chris Hoj, back to the show. How are you tonight, buddy?
Doing well. Thanks for getting Josh out of there. Really not trying to share the screen with him after those comments. So
very nice. So listen, in a way, it's kind of satisfying for me, because he said, hey, I was really hoping to share the screen with Chris McGill. Oh, sorry, bro. No go.
Yeah, I hope I win a card on his next auction for very low.
Yeah, there you go. No, of course we'll get him back on here with you. But listen, we were just talking about concerns and assurances going into next year. Let's continue that going with your thoughts on that particular topic, Chris. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, it was great. I loved hearing from Dave and Joe and Josh on that. But I have a concern that I think is even more important than what they've laid out. And I think the whole hobby needs to heed this very carefully. My concern for 2025 is that I'm not going to be able to get the cards that I need for my collection. And this is an existential crisis that we're all going to have to help deal with here. So I'm going to give an anecdote from last National. I was at the Cleveland National and working at the booth, the card letter booth. Didn't spend as much time walking around the show as I should have. And I also had convinced myself going into the National, Jeremy, that this needle in the haystack idea that I'm going to find the grail of all grails, it's a nice fairy tale that I tell myself about the National, but it's just not true. So I'm just going to chill. I'll go to a few trade nights and that'll be that. Well, lo and behold, one of the cards that I'm most interested in of all cards was in the building at the Cleveland National. And I only found out a month later when somebody happened to show me a picture of it. And ever since then, I've been having anxiety. I've been losing a little bit of sleep. I put out a bounty to try and draw out the card. No luck. I've posted on all the Facebook groups. I've contacted dozens and dozens of people, and all to no success whatsoever. I don't even know what nation this country's in. I think this card is in. I think it might be in Asia. I asked Carvin to keep an eye out for it when he was at the Macau show. I asked multiple people. I haven't been able to find it since. And it was under the same roof that I was under for a week in Cleveland. So my crisis here is that I'm not going to be able to find all the cards I need, Jeremy. And that's bothering me a lot right now.
Well, that's a legitimate concern to have, considering it's, especially if it's different from in the past where you have been able to find the cards that you've wanted. So I have to ask the question, why? Like, why is this happening? Is the hobby bigger than we think it is? Because that's what comes to my mind. What comes to your mind, Chris?
Why won't I be able to find the card? Well, it's something that I complain about right now, but if I was able to find every card that I want instantly, I don't think I'd like that either. So I'd be complaining either way, Jeremy. I think that's how that cookie crumbles.
So what about the other side of the coin then? What are you reassuring? What reassures you about the hobby going into 2025?
Just that it's still as fun as ever.
Because your answer to the first question was kind of like that answer that you give in an interview. Like, what's your biggest weakness? Oh, I work too hard. That's kind of how I'm interpreting your answer to what concerns do you have. I'm not going to be able to find all the cards I want. Reassurances. Are we going to get a similar response, or do you have something a little more concrete?
Just to be crystal clear, that's not a good answer to the question of concerns. That's just my selfish answer, but when I do hobby content, I selfishly consume it as well as participate in it. I'm in this hobby because I love it, and because it just brings a happiness to me. And when I listen to content, I listen to it for the same reason. I like to listen to the content that gets me wanting to put it on in the background, go pull out my shoebox and start going through my cards and sort of have ideas flowing and think about improving and curating my collection. An experience that I had that with very recently was your appearance with Brian and on the Cajun Cardboard YouTube channel. I just loved the range of I put a comment on the show, Jeremy, where I loved the range that you guys got into. I loved some of the depth that you got into on that show. And, that's what I love, consuming content wise. So it's something I'm looking forward to in 2025. I don't think there's ever been a time in my collecting history. And we'll also give a hat tip to Iowa Dave's show, which is another show that I put on and just think about how I'm going to change and update my collection. You sort of exist in this in-between state when listening to content, if you're me, where I'm listening to the content and people are talking, especially when they're talking about their collections or their philosophies or their approaches to collecting or the cards that they love or the cards that they want. And I hear it and I listen to what they're saying. But when I really am zoning out, I'm thinking about my collection while I'm doing it. So I'm hearing in one ear what these people are saying and thinking, but there's the other part of my brain is still thinking about how does this impact me? How am I going to improve my collection while it's happening? So I don't think there's ever been a time in my collecting history, which goes back to about 2016, where there's been so much content that I can put on, and every day I have an hour or two's worth of content, at least from the hobby, that puts me in the mind state of being really excited to think about my collection and to want to improve my collection, what cards I want to target, what cards maybe I'm ready to move on from. It's at an all-time high for me right now. So that's what I'm most enthusiastic about for 2025.
All right. No, I love that because it's a great outlook. It's a great way to approach the hobby and hobby content, which is, the community and everything like that. Dave, what does it sort of feel like to hear that Chris is, putting you on in the background or in the foreground, listening to your content? Because I know when I hear he's listening to my stuff or anybody, we as content creators, we get DMs. We all do. I know we all do. Saying, oh, liked what you did, or here's some feedback, this or that. it's always nice to know that people are listening. Dave, you've been very gracious with me saying, hey, Jeremy, here's some unsolicited feedback. And I'm like, no. And you did that a couple weeks ago, Dave. And I'm like, that's great, Dave, but that was all positive. Give me the negative. And you did. Not the negative, but where I can improve. And you did. And I value that. But from your perspective, what is it like to sort of hear that and to know that you're making a difference to people?
Well, I hear it and I'm flattered and thank you, but you also take it as a big responsibility. I remember saying to somebody once, it was back when the internet was first taken off, right? I'm like, oh, it's free, who cares? And he says to me, he goes, no, people's time is a currency and time isn't free. And you can most of the time go out and you can make more money, but you can't make more time. And so what I try to do is I try just not to waste people's time. And I realize that not every episode I make is going to be memorable, but at least the effort is going to be there to try to provoke some thought or to try to be honest about where I'm coming from. And I completely was relating to what Chris was saying, to Chris, what you were saying about how you kind of zone out when you hear the right kind of content. And for me, I have a pretty long commute to work each day. And the one I'm thinking of in particular, when the interview really hits, is Brett McGrath's Friday episodes when he's interviewing somebody. And there'll be times when I'm driving and the person who's talking to will say something and I go off in a whole different direction. And I realize I've just driven about 8 miles on this interstate that I wasn't hearing anything else from this interview because I was then thinking about something else that this person had said. So now I'm hitting rewind, trying to go back to what I missed before, right? But there is something about honest content and thoughtful content that has a real utility, or heck, even if it's just entertaining, I think that's really valuable too, because you just want to have some fun with it. I think that's really, really important. So that's all I try to do. And I do really appreciate any and all feedback because people don't have to give me any of their time. And when they do, I'm just so, this sounds hokey, but I'm really honored. I really cherish that.
Yeah, no, the flattery is it is flattering to know that, and the responsibility though when you use that word, I think time is a currency. Where we as content creators are always grateful when anyone you look at your watch hours, your listen time, your downloads, your views. It's very special, and it's rewarding, and it's encouraging, and it's motivating. It's all these things to keep on going and doing it. Okay, I want to now change the topic, and I want to, Joe, I'm going to let you introduce this because you're the one that mentioned it to me, and we're definitely going to get Dave's thoughts on this too. So Joe, you had told me that, you and Chris have dialogue, and you guys have been talking about the topic. I'll just introduce what it is, but then I want you, basically, the topic is scarcity and the difference between modern scarcity and vintage scarcity. Vintage scarcity being organic, natural, modern scarcity being manufactured, produced scarcity. Joe, give us a bit of context about some of the discussions you've had with Chris, and then let's get into that discussion. I'll get Joe's thoughts, Chris's thoughts, and then we'll get yours, Dave, and I'll pipe in too. So, Joe.
Well, it kind of emerges as a story that, probably started in the days of the pandemic where, a lot of us were having deep conversations well into the evening, if not morning time, on the old clubhouse. And I was, I was dabbling in the modern card world, and, particularly as a Warriors collector and Curry and all that, you're into the modern, but I did it with a little bit of dubiousness around, okay, like I'm coming from the vintage landscape. I'm coming from, standard caramel E98s and, T206s or play balls or Gaudy heads up. And, I had a little snobbery myself around just what, modern cards, ultra modern cards in particular, amounted to, and yet, in talking and hearing Hoj, and his passion, and some of this also emerged just listening to his content, both crossover and before that House of Jordans, and kind of opening my mind a little bit more to maybe some of my own biases and blind spots, And I kind of turn it over to Hoj here, because I think he's the one that kind of helped me. And it's not necessarily an either or conversation, right? It's more maybe just appreciating different sensibilities and maybe more expansive thinking around collecting and understanding what we tend to think of as natural or manufactured scarcity. So Chris, I'll just turn it over to you. You probably remember those conversations, but you probably weren't necessarily realizing that you were impacting me and my sensibilities in that moment, because I think you were just speaking from your own how your own hobbying emerged. So take it away.
Yes. Joe is one of the best guys to chat ideas with, because he scores off the charts on conscientiousness. It's hard to say something that will offend Joe. You can say something he'll disagree with, but he'll disagree in such a pleasant fashion that you almost get lured into throwing extreme things at Joe just because you know that it's a very safe space. But okay, so here's what Joe and I were talking about a little bit. I'll take the baton from him. And I need to give two preambles to this that will be very brief. First of all, I respect and love vintage collectors. I think that vintage collectors are some of my
favorite. Butter us up, buddy.
Yes, because you know that why would I butter up because I'm going to say something they're not going to like in a minute. But I love and respect vintage collectors, and I think that they are some of my role models in the hobby. And they're some of the people who have been the kindest and the most generous people I've had the occasion to interact with. And even when Josh and I on the crossover had a brief session of bashing the 52 Topps mantle in good fun, not with any extra seriousness, they were just so kind, and they could have gotten a lot more upset than they did. So, and I just learned so much about collecting from them, and sort of those of us who are collecting 90s and ultra modern are taking a baton from them in a certain way. And so I have a lot of respect for that. And who knows, maybe one day I'll collect vintage and pre-war. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, so the topic is manufactured scarcity. And that term is bandied about as a pejorative towards ultra modern cards. People might say, well, it's not really a pejorative, but it is. And that's fine. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about why it's used. And so I went to the good old Google, and I just started looking up instances where manufactured rarity had been used, and I found an old post on Net54, an old thread, and it was vintage collectors going back and forth with each other, sort of explaining that, hey, look, and this post, this thread was from 2014, and they were saying in this thread that, look, ultra modern cards, they have their 1/1s, they have their out of 10s, they have their out of 100s, but these cards aren't as rare as they seem, because there's more than one product. And the era that we collect maybe only had one product or two products per season. These guys have 10, 15, 20. And by the time you've counted up all the base set 1/1s and out of 10s and out of 50s, and you've counted up all the insert set 1/1s out of 10s and out of 50s, and you've compiled them all together over one season, these cards aren't as rare as the stamp suggests. That 1/1 is really one of 100 1/1s that all belong to the same season. It's just been partitioned and divided into different genres, different brands, different products, different types of cards. I think that's a totally valid point. So that was my second preamble. I just want to seed that point in advance, that I think that that's a valid point. That's a valid observation. And that it even exists within my own collecting, as I sort of struggle with collecting a Michael Jordan card that's out of 100 versus collecting a Nikola Jokic card that's out of 10 or something. There is more of an equivalence there than it might seem, just comparing one number to the next, because Jokic has lots of cards numbered to 10. Jordan has very few cards that were numbered to 100 or less from his playing days. Okay, with those things said, now I want to sort of talk about why I think manufactured rarity. I'll just give my thesis up front. I think manufactured rarity is not only not a pejorative, I think manufactured rarity is the final form of rarity. And because it is the most objective form of rarity, there's something to admire about it. So I'm going to identify 4 types of rarity. First, we have manufactured rarity. which quite literally means the manufacturer of the cards manufactured the cards to be rare, and then in some instances puts a stamp on them. So it's a very literal meaning, manufactured rarity. But as I described the next three types of rarity, these three types of rarity are manufactured as well, just not quite as literally. These types of rarity are conceptually manufactured, and you'll see what I mean in a second. Okay, so the second type of rarity is condition or eye appeal rarity. And the way that this rarity is manufactured is that it's the product of the mind of the collector. So the collector looks at a card and decides, Jeremy, I know that you are one of the leading proponents and have ingrained in my mind the importance of registration, especially when looking at vintage cards. You look at registration, you look at color quality, you look at centering, and then we can look at condition things outside of eye appeal things, such as the quality of the corners and the edges and so forth, quality of the surface. But these are all things that are subjective. So there might be a consensus about them. We might be able to reach a broad consensus, and we all agree that this one looks nicer, more nicely centered than the other one, but we won't all ever agree. Maybe a majority of us will agree, maybe a strong minority of us will agree, but there will always be that guy who prefers the PSA 1 because it has more character. It's off-centered or it's beat up, but I like it more, actually. And you know what? There's nothing I can say to that person because it's subjective. Because when we've entered into the realm of eye appeal, we've entered into the realm of the subjective. We can reach intersubjective agreement at some point. We can maybe even form a consensus, but it's subjective. So we have that type of rarity, but it's consensus driven. It's opinion driven. It's subjective. Then the third type of rarity that we have is collector decision rarity, which is the type of rarity. When I say that, I mean, as collectors, let's say there was a set that had 10,000 cards, 10,000 sets printed from 50 years ago, and 8,000 of them got discarded. They got put into the spokes of bicycles. They got thrown away. Those cards weren't collected at the time, and only 2,000 survived. Well, in that case, now we only have 2,000 copies left. But again, this rarity is the byproduct of decisions that collectors at the time made about whether or not to preserve those cards. There's something subjective about that too. That rarity is the byproduct of subjective choices that ultimately got us to the point. Now, we can objectively say that there's only so many left, that objectively there's only 2,000 left. There once was 10,000, but we'll never really know. We'll never really be sure that there won't be a black swamp find and 50 more might come out at some point in the future. So there's a level of subjectivity to that too. And then finally, the fourth type is grading rarity. Grading rarity is the sort of the codification of the condition and eye appeal rarity, where the supposed objective third party grader comes in, evaluates the card, determines what the grade is, and then encapsulates it. So there's obvious, I don't think I need to harp on the nature of the subjectivity there. There is a degree of objectivity there. The objective part is that no matter if we agree with the grade that the grading company gave the card or not, what we can't dispute is that it does exist in a slab and it does have a grade that the grading company assigned to it. We can agree with it or not, but it is objectively true that it is in that case, it does bear that grade and it does exist in the world. Okay, so I've given these four types of rarity, and I think it's fairly comprehensive. Somebody might be able to come up with more, but now I want to bring it back to my thesis, which is when we compare manufactured rarity to the other types, the advantage that it has is that it's the most objective type of rarity. It's the type of rarity that we can, with the most certainty, identify as being true, independent of who's looking at it. So when the manufacturer puts the out of 10 stamp on the Prism Gold, there are 10 copies. It's an indisputable fact, setting aside the possibility that maybe the manufacturer will turn on the presses later, or maybe they put an extra copy in the vault or something when it was made. But theoretically, that stamp out of 10 means that there are 10 and there are only 10, and there will always only be 10. That level of objective rarity is a credit to the manufactured rarity. And with that, I will end my defense of manufactured rarity.
Man, so much material there. And I have responses to some of them, and I'm sure some people are thinking some of these same thoughts I have. So you talk about decisions that collectors were made, and this is not a debate. I'm just adding on to the discussion here, and maybe providing some thoughts and ideas that you could add to your own dissertation to the extent you haven't considered these yet. So, condition rarity. I have a note here. I basically said, there is no option in terms of, like, ever since card supplies came out, we as a hobby started protecting our cards. So the condition scarcity, condition rarity, based on decisions that were made along the way, it almost, like, some vintage 70s and 80s, which I consider 80s to be vintage for my personal definition, that a lot of those cards are still in great shape because they were protected. I think where where the manufacturer comes into play there is where they just weren't produced in a consistent condition. You said that certain eye appeal and even, I guess, grading criteria are subjective, but I think we can all agree that a centered card is a better condition card. Strong corners are a better condition card. And back in the up until maybe going into even the 60s, people didn't care about the condition of their cards. Even many in the 80s, they would flip them against the wall and put them in the spikes of their bikes and those sorts of things. So there is that organic scarcity, which is what I'm just calling it for out of convenience, which is a result of decisions that were made. Protect our cards, play with our cards. Then the collector decisions, or their mothers. A lot of those 10,000 cards that were produced, maybe there's 2,000 left now. Those were decisions that were made by people other than the collectors in many cases, by the collectors, spouse or parent or ex-boyfriend, girlfriend who threw them out the way, that kind of thing, destroyed them. So that is another layer to those comments that you made there. And then grading rarity, to me, is, it's a legitimate form of rarity, scarcity, pop 10, PSA 10, pop 1. Like, how many times have we heard that, and how attractive is that to so many people, even though in many cases, that PSA 10, that pop 1 PSA 10 card might not be as nice as, several 9s or 8s or whatever the case may be. But I really like how you broke down and thought about it. And it's hard to disagree that manufactured scarcity, which, like you said, it's used in the pejorative by many people. To me, it's just a way to label it. I don't know what else to call it. I don't think it's bad. I collect it. I have lots of modern day one-of-ones in my collection, and I recognize that they're rare. But the thing that you said that makes the most sense to me out of all that is that it's the most objective. It really is. We know the print runs. And I think part of that is maybe disappointing to some people who like that vintage, that high eye appeal specimen that might be, trapped in a, looks like a 7 or an 8, near mint, but it's trapped in a VG holder because of whatever, some technical irregularity or, flaw on the card. And I know I'm kind of just going in circles here. I got a lot of thoughts in my head because you went on and you presented so many great comments there. And I don't, you haven't really, I don't feel one way or the other on them. I think both are valid as legitimate collectibles for people to chase and want to add to their collection. Some people don't want them. They're not interested. That's fine. Stick with your vintage. You don't want your vintage. Stick with your modern. Collect what you like. I mean, I think that's something we all respect at the end of the day. But I don't know. I just want to say thanks for all those. Thanks for the dissertation. Your thesis, I think, was very interesting. And I don't know if I added anything to it or not there, other than mothers throw cards too, and they're not made. That's not the collector making the decision, but they are the decisions that are still being made out there. And I think it's also interesting to note that once supplies came into the picture, and I remember getting my first penny sleeve in the 80s and thinking to myself, well, this is great. Now my cards are going to stay in good condition, because I was never a kid that flipped them against a wall or put them in my bike spokes. So all that said, I want to give some other people a chance here. Let's go to Dave. Get your thoughts on Chris's thesis on scarcity, Dave, and where do you fall? What do you enjoy as far as modern vintage cars that are scarce?
Sure. And to give you sort of the paradigm from which I'm viewing this is what I collect. The last 3 cards that I bought, one was from 2018 Topps, one was 2012 Topps Update, and then the other was a 1910 T218. So I kind of see this from different perspectives, but I think it's a bit of a sort of a false argument. And the reason why is because I don't think we would be having this discussion of organic scarcity versus manufactured scarcity if it wasn't for the grading. Because you don't know how many raw 59 Bob Gibsons there are. You don't know exactly how many Wilt Chamberlains there are out there. You only know how many graded ones there are out there for the most part, provided that the pop counts are all up to date or whatnot. Given that, I think that talking about vintage cards and scarcity, that's also manufactured scarcity, because it's manufactured not by the card itself, not by Sweet Corporal, not by Bowman or Leaf or anybody else, or Gowdy, but by PSA and BVG and SGC and whoever else. And that's where the scarcity comes from. So that's as manufactured as everything else, in my opinion. And so given that, I agree, Chris, with what you were saying about, at least with the numbers on the backs of the cards. If a gold prism to 10, that is a deliberate, intentional, unambiguous way of letting collectors know this is how many that there are. And for whatever reason, whether it's just being able to own one or own one in the highest grade, that there are no other ones out there. And is it manufactured? Yes, but it also takes the guesswork out. And I find that valuable. And in some ways, a little bit more appealing than whatever PSA or SGC happens to say that something is. So I would, coming back around to what my point is I think it's all manufactured scarcity, because we would not be talking about the scarcity of vintage cards if it wasn't for the grade.
Right. There are, I think one way to get around that, instead of, just kind of defaulting that it's all manufactured, is that you've got the unknown production numbers and you've got the known production numbers. And that's, I think, really, and that there is a line in the sand there in around 1990 or so, when we saw the first serially numbered cards. Now we know how many there are. And I think that's really at the heart of this discussion is what is, is it, again, I use the word organic because cards deteriorated over time through use and enjoyment and playing, versus nowadays, we don't do that anymore. You'd think someone was nuts if they took a card numbered out of 5 or 10 or 1 or 99 and just started playing with them, putting it in the spoke of their bikes. People do it for shock value. We see it once in a while. Someone burns a card or someone rips up a valuable card just to get views and clicks or whatever. But to me, that's the major differentiating factor between what we are calling manufactured versus organic or natural rarity is some have serial numbers, some don't. But I agree, Dave, at the bottom of it's all manufactured. Some are manufactured with quality, some weren't, some with serial numbers, some without. Chris, before we go to Joe, you've heard from me and Dave. I want to give you a chance to respond before we go to Joe.
Yeah, well, loved the comments that you made. The comment about supplies set a light bulb off in my head, just because if you sort of, in a historical revisionist way, if I wanted to reconstruct, without having been there, what I think the evolution of desirability in cards looks like, I would probably sketch it out like this. I'm not saying it happened this way, but if I were to reconstruct it in the way that makes sense to me logically, I would think that maybe it played out this way. It would have started with the realization before supplies, before grading, before manufactured rarity. It would have just started with, well, here, these 10,000 copies came off the printing press. Some have really nice color, some don't. Some are nicely centered, some aren't. Some are well preserved, some aren't. And this creates a natural hierarchy. Now, why is a hierarchy natural? There's something in the collecting brain, I think. There's something in the human brain, possibly. I don't want to make any assumptions about so-called human nature, but there's probably something in some of us who collect that sort of want and need the hierarchy, the ranking, the stratification, the tiers. And we can create those structures if we only have something that sort of resembles something we can sort of all agree on. This is better than that. The centered is better than not centered. Sharp corners are better than not. And so you start getting this pyramid forming. At the very top, you have the ones that are best preserved and nicely centered and best color and best registration. And then that sort of starts to develop, and it becomes a pattern, and it becomes a habit, and it becomes a thing that everybody looks for at card shows, and becomes a way of sort of, as a community, consensus ranking things. And then grading comes along, and it codifies it, and it says, okay, well, we have the issue sort of the dealers trying to tell you this is the best centered one, but you actually may have seen other better centered ones. You know that the dealer might not be telling the truth here. So grading is the third party that says, well, we'll look at it on behalf of you guys without a bias towards either one of you, and then you can reinsert this graded copy back into the marketplace. And then you can have an agreement. You can have a third party that's told you what the condition and the IPL of it is. And then from there, the manufacturers were able to see, well, the ones that are in the best condition that are fewer in number are desired. They're sort of like the best copies. Well, what if we took the initiative and we started making chase cards that are the best copies themselves? What if we then not only took that concept a step further, but what if we took the very best possible options at our disposal, like memorabilia and autographs, and we started mixing those with rare production numbers? And then even within that, what if we started taking the very best pieces of memorabilia, like the NHL or the NFL Shield or the NBA logo man, and what if we reserved those to be associated with the very best versions of these cards? And what if we reserved the best colors, like the sleek elegance of black or the bold beauty of gold, and we use the best colors and the best memorabilia pieces to be associated with what we think are the best chase cards, which we will also make in the most limited quantity. And you can sort of just trace it. I'm not saying it did happen this way, but I'm saying we could conceivably see how this sort of evolution occurred, and each iteration learned from it, the previous iteration, and then built on it to get to the point where we are at today. That's something that I think about. And then Dave made the point that I was going to make, but I don't need to make it. But I sort of wanted to push the envelope with it, which is just that whether it's organic, natural rarity or it's manufactured rarity, in reality, it's all manufactured. Some of it is manufactured quite literally by the manufacturer, but the other rarities are manufactured either by the minds of collectors that we conceptually cluster things, but we are manufacturing those distinctions, just not quite as literally, or it's quite literally manufactured by the grading company who's manufacturing slabs and encapsulating these cards and then creating different products of the cards in the slabs that then have different quantities of each. So I wanted to push the envelope with that, but Dave already beat me to it, and I thought that's a good point.
Yeah. Great stuff. Joe, you wanna pipe in and let us know your thoughts on all this?
Pipe in. Yeah. So, when I was first collecting, outside of opening packs in the 70s, I would, go to conventions, and the two players I collected at that time were Pete Rose and Hank Aaron. And I got every issue that I could get, basically. And so when Hoj and I were having this conversation recently, I went to Card Ladder and I was looking at the pop reports, which of course are only the graded examples of those cards, as Dave astutely points out. And the pop report total population on the Pete Rose rookie is just a touch below 10,000. That's a high number, 1963 tops. It's a card I owned, and eventually I got rid of it, and I wouldn't mind owning another one. And then the Hank Aaron 54 tops, there's a touch over 11,000. And I guess I'm referencing that because I think when I came to this conversation with Chris around, what is so damn fascinating to you about a black 1 of 1 that just happens to have a stamp on it? And, okay, Jokic is a pretty damn good player, but I mean, really, like, are we really equating the value of that with something over here that in my mind was kind of sacred. But then when I started looking at the numbers, and of course, of those 11,000, maybe 20 or 30 are in nines, and maybe just 2 or 3 are in tens. But few of us will ever own those, because those get into the 6 figures. And then you get a whole slew of 5s and 4s that, as you know, Jeremy, you can find a beautiful 4 or 5 that makes you feel like, God, I can't tell why this isn't an 8. And I'm proud to have it in my collection. But in terms of just thinking about the fact that, okay, you can have a transcendental player or an iconic player who happens to be in a different era, and in an era when, there's developments, and this gets very sort of nuanced, like, were you before Select expanded the blacks to 6 or 8 versions, or before? There's, this gets back to kind of a little bit of what Brent was talking about, just kind of finding your strategy, finding kind of maybe the margins in those areas to focus in on. But I guess I just, in that whole process, I realized that I had maybe romanticized the idea of what vintage was when you look at 11,000 available copies graded and more raw, versus, even if you expand it from, it's not just a 1 of 1 black, maybe there's, 10, 12, 15, but nonetheless, it is a pretty darn rare card. And especially if that's your player and you're into something a little more contemporary, that's really powerful. And I'll share one last thing. Chris mentioned that I'm a safe space. What I would say about Chris is that almost no conversation have I had with Chris where there's not some reference to objective, measurable data. And I appreciate that about him. And I think, from what I understand, it informs his collecting, because even getting into memorabilia, he mentioned memorabilia, getting into signatures, there's concerns about that, as we know in the hobby. I mean, it might be the difference between, how an autograph was signed, or if it's sticker or on card. It might be, the source of the memorabilia. Was it a photo shoot? Was it player worn? Was it game used? There's a lot of different, but what came to me in the course of all of this conversation and dialogue that we had, that I became much more appreciative than I ever was of something that's just a pure, hopefully beautiful card, because I'm not going to be interested in it if it's not beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, but that is, from an identifiable set that has some prominence in the hobby, that has some sort of staying power, already exists, and has a very firm sense of, like, this is the only one that exists, or this is the 10 that exist. So anyway, it's more just my coming around to that idea, maybe, and maybe it's not an argument, Dave. Maybe it's more just an awakening that I had 2 or 3 years ago about the power of ultra modern, and why it is so compelling to many, and has become compelling to myself.
Dave, want to let you just comment, and then we'll let you go. And I know you've been sort of hanging out here for a bit, so I appreciate having you, of course. And we're gonna have you back for sure, Dave. But you've now heard from Chris and Joe. Any sort of thoughts that have popped into your head?
No, other than that, I think that discussions like this are just really fun to have, and I think that they're important to have, because there can be a tendency, and like, I'm probably projecting and speaking for myself, to kind of just skate through this hobby space a lot of the times, and not really thinking about what I'm doing. But I think that when we can be intentional like this and have these discussions, I think it makes it more fun. I think it makes it more enriching, and I think it makes you feel more. I think the term I would use would be it's just sort of ingrained in it, because when you're like invested in it, because you tend to think about it and you put that brain power into it and you're willing to think about it, I just think that's really, really important. So I appreciate everyone's points, and I've had a good time tonight.
Well, thanks, Dave. And, I think sometimes there can be some peacefulness and some beauty to just sort of skating through the hobby, not thinking too hard. But I think that has to be paired with not spending a lot of money, because if you're doing it with a lot of money, you could make some poor mistakes if you're just sort of skating through and not thinking about it. But having these discussions and being informed and really hearing other hobby participants' theories, thoughts, viewpoints, outlooks, I think that all just helps expand your mind and help to I'll use the word influence you in what you think is a better direction for yourself. And I know that I'm constantly influenced by my friends and even people that, that I just follow in the hobby. I'm always open to learning new things. And I think that's another wonderful thing. I remember in grade school, one of my teachers said to me, and I didn't understand it at the time, so I was literally in grade 3, and she said, I'm always learning. And I thought to myself, you're so old. You're probably 28 already, and you're always learning. Because when you're 8 years old, 28's pretty ancient, and here we are, almost twice that. And I don't feel that old. But Dave, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Thanks for what you do in the hobby and for the hobby. You become a key part of my hobby experience. So, and grateful for our relationship and friendship. Thank you for coming on, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. We've had a bunch of comments come in, and we have Josh and we have Carvin who are still hanging out in the back room. And I did kind of promise them that they could both come on, because I know, Chris, Josh really wants to have screen time with you. And Carvin, I wanted to get to a comment that came in from Cage way earlier and get that one up on the screen. So, Carvin, are you still there too? I see you're there, but your camera's off. If you're still there, just turn your camera back on. And he's still there. We're going to bring everybody out now, guys, because we have 10 minutes left in the scheduled timing. So let's bring back on. Let's bring Josh. Let's bring Carvin. We're going 5-way here, guys. First time we've done this on Sports Cards Live 2.0, but want to thank Carvin and Josh for both hanging out there. And let's just start this part of the show now with sort of giving you guys both the ability to just speak to anything you've heard here over the last however long it's been. Josh, we'll start with you. Anything you want to mention, or if you just want to say hi.
Hi. Also, I like this discussion about manufactured rarity and types of condition rarity, and card companies have been manufacturing rarity since the beginning of time. 1933 Gaudi intentionally left out the Napoleon Lajoie card, and you had to write in to get it. So there's maybe 25 of them. Honus Wagner's card was destroyed because the printing plate broke. Same with Eddie Plank's from the T206 set. So those have been manufactured since then. And there's stuff from the 1890s. So manufactured rarity is nothing really new, but I think it's very interesting, and I like that phenomenon. I used to be not a grade scarcity fan, but I kind of have come along to it on some cards, because there are some cards that are extremely hard to find in a 10, based on how they're created, the foil, the acetate, how if the card scratches or not. So, I'm not going to spend the money for a 10, but, I'm fascinated by the phenomenon.
I'm so much more enamored by eye appeal scarcity than I am by grading scarcity. Grade scarcity almost means nothing to me now, because it depends. It means more to me on older cards, newer cards, and 9 to 10, they all look the same to me. I can't tell with the naked eye the difference. So eye appeal scarcity is this new thing for me that I've been chasing for years, but it's really come front of mind for me in the last couple of years. We lost Carvin for a moment there, so we'll let him do his thing. So I'm going to go to a couple of comments here that have come in. First of all, Ben Diamond said, collecting keeps me from feeling too old, have to keep play in life, or else you become too serious and / cold. I just know that I feel like the hobby keeps me young and I just love it so much. 90s b-ball cards. I think this is the right question for the group. Are 90s cards tomorrow's vintage, or are 90s cards the middle child stuck between vintage and ultra modern? I love that. I love that question, Jake, because I think that the 90s is its own era that is stuck between sort of vintage, pre-war, post-war junk wax and modern, ultra modern. So I love that. Does anyone want to add to this question before we go on? Because we still have a lot to get through here. Put up your hand if you want to say anything on that. No hands. I'm going to keep going. Sean from Victory Investment says, for instance, even talking vintage, manufactured rarity still exists. We just don't know the exact print numbers. Like they printed way less 32 US caramel. Josh, you just called out the Nap Lajoie, and I'll call out the the Bert Corbeau who no one knows about. He was an obscure defenseman, 1923 William Patterson hockey set. That was the chase card, so that less kids could send in for the premium, whatever they'd win. And now that was like the biggest card in vintage hockey for so long. And I'm like, who cares? No one knows about this guy. I will not chase, just like I won't chase a card just because it's a high grade or a 1 of 1 unless I really want it. I'm not going to chase, I'm not going to build the set with a bunch of commons. I don't care about the players. Anyway, that makes no sense to me, that card right there. Sean goes on to say manufactured rarity has really grown. And guys, put up your hand just so I can clear. Otherwise, I'm going to run through these comments if you want to jump in on any of this. Nick Leach says the cards that are recognized by masses are the ones behind Jeremy, not manufactured rarity cards. I'm just not sure manufactured rarity makes a card iconic. I like rare serial number stuff. And this is a great comment because I agree. Manufactured, a 1 of 1 Superfractor Golden Treasure Black from Panini isn't iconic in and of itself. In that case, the player, I think, has to somewhat become iconic as well, or at least, among the GOATs or the secondary GOATs. And again, put up your hand if you want to say anything on these comments, guys. Sean says, so modern numbered cards with a low print run can also obtain situational rarity as well. And I'm not sure what he meant by that. Does anyone here have an insight into what he means by situational rarity? If not, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I just think he means that the card can be rare for its era. Like a 90s card out of 100 can be rare in the context of 90s cards, but a card out of 100 wouldn't be rare today.
Love it. Thank you for that. Peeps here said, in my opinion, objective grading rules are great, and I appeal is subjective. Numbers are only numbers. Objective grading rules are great. They're great if they are consistently adhered to. And listen, I think that, the biggest company in our space, PSA, is as consistent as they possibly can be. And that's a credit to them. And I every company out there has an acceptable degree of error in what they produce and what they put out there to their customers. Like Apple with their iPhones, there is an acceptable degree of phones that are going to be returned because there's a glitch in them or an issue. And I think that same sort of thing has to be discussed at the executive level at PSA. What is our acceptable level of error or inconsistency, whatever that is, if they can even measure it? And that's just, it's part of what it is. It is. And I heard Nat recently on Neo's show saying we want to, I think it was Nat. It was either him or it was Brad from PSA Canada on the Gong show the other day. But the PSA wants to be consistent. I think they want to be consistent. Then sometimes I think, but then that hurts their crack and resub income revenue stream. But I think there's enough submissions. They don't need that probably. Card Fuchsia says rarity is rarity. Carvin says, I love manufactured scarcity. It's like playing hobby god. That comment did catch my eye in the comments, Carvin. Do you have anything? Would you feel like expanding on that at all? Or is it all there in what I just read?
Sorry, I'm having problems with my holder for my phone. So no, I just said that as kind of in jest, because if I'm manufacturing the rarity, then I'm the one controlling what the pop count is, right? I actually believe that every rare card should be serial numbered. That way, there's no issues there's no questions, there's no vagueness. It's defined, and that's it. Similar to what we were talking about in terms of vintage cards, right? Because there's that vagueness of how many raw cards there are, or if it's been graded the wrong way. I think just knowing that the pop count is 10 or 5 or 25, and that's defined. That's it. But I actually, when you're talking about 101s, I think, Joe, in terms of the rarity issue you're saying, really, a lot of people like owning 101s because it's a way of kind of saying, hey, I own it and nobody else has it, right? So that's part of the reason why people love having 101s. Like one thing that Chris always stressed about why he's collecting certain players is the fact that he can be the apex collector. And there is a lot of that happening in our hobby, is that, like someone was talking about, and I used to see it when I went to Hong Kong in Asia, was people would get pages of 9 pocket sheets and full of Kobe refractors, Kobe rookie refractors. And it's a way of saying that I can do it and you can't. It's flexing, or being part of the community and saying I got the best collection, right? And I think the funny thing is that, so something like Sotheby's that, that I curated on, it's key because there's a lot of collectors in the other collectibles world that can come into place, and now they can be an apex collector with $5 million versus $30 million just to buy one Van Gogh painting. So those are true things that can happen. That the whole parallel of collectibles in the sports cards is actually really new and recent, and a lower market cap than other collectibles out there. Whether it's watches, whether it's wine, whether it's fine art, automobiles, everything. All these guys can come in one day and become an apex collector for the future. And I think that's one great thing about what Fanatics is doing, is that they're trying to relay the collectibles world to other collectors versus just the masses.
Something just doesn't sit well with me when I think about somebody who's not in the space coming in and becoming an apex collector because they have 50 million to play with. Like that doesn't. I don't know. That's not somebody that I would really want to have on this show to talk about their collecting, because all they can tell me is I had 50 million and I went and bought the best stuff. Like that doesn't impress me. What impresses me is someone who's curating the collection, researching it, doing the work. Josh, what do you want to jump in with?
Yeah, it's like taking candy from a baby. It's no skill. There's no what's the challenge? You come in and take everything. Like, oh wow, look what I got. Like, come on. Again, the hunt is like 90% of the fun.
Yeah. And Chris, I wanted to get, we were talking about, when I said earlier that, a black, and because it came from a comment that one of ones aren't necessarily iconic. And I said, yeah, that's right. Some are, we know Superfractor is kind of iconic now, but then I said, it relies more on the player now. What did you think to that comment? What do you think about that? Like, is there something else that I could, am I missing something in that, or what do you think?
Oh yeah, you and the comment nailed it. That's, I think, one of the battles that the ultra modern collector is facing right now, is which of these cards will matter in 20 years, because the likelihood that they all will is low. And how do I hedge and take some cards from a lower tier brand and bring them into my collection just in case one of those brands turns out to be really important later? So that's the one thing I would add, is that the iconic status was very player-centric, which is what you were pointing out, Jeremy. It definitely is player-centric. Player first, even, as MK might say. But now that there's also 20 or 30 products per season per sports, or sometimes even more, now you have another variable, which is how iconic is the brand. How iconic is the brand? Because the brand's iconic status is going to matter quite a bit too.
Right. Yeah. Great. That's where the one thing that I didn't say there is, and I completely agree with that. That makes good sense for sure there. Carvin, you were going to jump in earlier, I think. Was there something else you wanted to add to that line of discussion?
No, I think you guys all hit it on the nose, so I'm good.
Okay. Nick Leach said, are rookie cards serial numbered the only really important cards long term? I mean, I'm going to say no to that. But rookie year serially numbered cards are definitely important, in my opinion. To my collection, they are, but they're not the only ones. Especially when your player doesn't have a rookie card, or players you want to collect don't have a rookie card, a rookie year card that is serially numbered. Now, of course, these are going to be players who retired prior to serial numbers. Although we do see, post playing days cards all the time. So, but that's a different thing altogether. All right. Nick Leach says iconic card images matter. I mean, I agree. Like, to me, the image is important. I don't want many cards in my collection where I don't love the way they look. Linda's first says, I didn't realize there was a big disdain for modern cards with manufactured scarcity. This is an interesting comment, because that's Linda's first perception right now. But I would say that there's very usually, like, people think of it as vintage versus modern collectors, but let's face it, most vintage collectors that I know are quite rational and open-minded and can respect the modern day collector. So, but there will be a group of those people who are kind of have it out for the modern collectors. They think modern ruined the hobby or whatever it is. So I wouldn't think there's a big disdain for it, but I would say there is a disdain from a a section of the vintage collector who doesn't dabble in modern. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, you're kind of nodding in agreement. Okay. Brett Miles says, talk about concerns in the hobby, both what's org in this context? Both organic and manufactured scarcity, I think, creates a type of scarcity in collectors who can obtain these cards. Does it create a wedge in the hobby? Haves versus have-nots. Yeah, that's definitely something. And that's every area of life, right? In my opinion, like there's always going to be, we have it in vehicles, we have it in clothing, we have it in neighborhoods. You collect what you like and collect what fits within your budget. He goes on to say, I'm generalizing, but I live vicariously through many collectors who obtain cards that will likely remain outside what my bank account can handle. I am mature enough in my hobby journey and that it's fine. And Brett was a guest on the show here back in like September, and a very well-received, popular show. Everybody loved him. I recommend you go watch it, listen to it, because Brett is just a wonderful collector, a great friend of mine, and someone I've known in the hobby here locally for over 20 years, and a true hobbyist. Card Fuchsia says people sell in-person autos to buy manufactured autos of the same player. Does sentiment really matter in collecting? Let's use this as one of our final discussions of the evening, fellas, and let's do a round table on this comment here, because this one, when I first read it, and this comment is 20 minutes old already. When I first read this comment, my mind, I was like, I couldn't focus on what I was looking at of the screen. It took me out of my zone for a moment, because I think it's a great comment, or just one that sparks discussion. So let's go around the horn here, clockwise. Joe, start with you. Does sentiment really matter in collecting? And do you ever see yourself selling in-person autos to buy manufactured autos? And I would just refer to these as in-person versus pack pulled, because the only person who can manufacture an auto is the player who's signing that card or sticker. I mean, it's a team effort at that point, right? But Joe, let's start with you. Your thoughts on this comment?
Yeah, I mean, if the in-person involves you actually obtaining the autograph, I think that's an obvious personal experience that would lean me in that direction. But short of that, if it's I'm not quite sure I have a huge disagreement with the comment, other than if I'm understanding it correctly, manufactured autos of the same player. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's, did you obtain it? So for me, actually, it would be sentimental to have obtained it, and I would prefer that to something that was manufactured.
Interesting. And for me, I have no interest in going to get a player to sign a card for me. I'd rather have their pack pulled auto. That's just the way I collect. I don't. When I've interviewed a ton of athletes this year at various card shows, and I've never asked a single one of them for an autograph. All I want is a picture with them. That's the memory. I don't need their autograph. I have their autograph already. Chris, your turn, please.
Yeah, this is a big topic that I'm not even going to try to wrap my arms all the way around in one answer. I just want to address one little tiny part that's tangentially related, which is the theory of the in-person autograph on a vintage card. And it's really interesting because it harkens back to rarity. So the idea being that if you take like a Mansell card from the 50s or the 60s, there may be thousands of copies, but how many of them actually were signed in person by Mansell, and especially if they were signed contemporaneous with his playing days, or even better, the season for which it was issued. That adds rarity, and then that adds tiers of rarity if you can place the autograph to a specific period. And then you also have pop reports that are pretty good at reflecting an estimate of how many are out there. That adds rarity in a way that's quite similar to what the serial stamp would do 50, 60, 70 years later in the hobby. So I just like the observation about what the in-person autograph does, and how the context of an in-person autograph on a Mansell card from the 50s is so different from hundreds of people gathering around Justin Herbert outside of training camp and having him sign one of thousands of in-person signed mosaic base Justin Herbert rookie cards that may have been signed. They're two very different types of in-person autographs that contribute very different types of rarity to the equation.
Thank you. Josh, let's hear from you.
All right, so I'll take the second part first. I think sentimentality definitely matters in collecting. That's why I think most of us collect in the first place. I don't really deal with autographs or anything, so I don't really, can't really answer that. But I personally don't like in-person autographs on cards. I just think it ruins the card. I know that's a kind of an outlier take, but I agree with Krista. Obviously, nothing to disagree about. Factually, it does create layers of scarcity. Like a 52 mantle autograph card is pretty cool. I think it visually takes away from the card personally, but it is neat in terms of scarcity and rarity. So.
Yeah, and I do have, I think 3 or maybe 4 in-person autos in my collection at this time, and I don't collect them. I don't pursue them. I don't covet them. The ones I have are because it's like they came from a special collection, and I wanted them for that reason, and I think it's cool to have a couple. But yeah, I'm with you, Josh. A card that wasn't designed to have an autograph, I find that the autograph throws me off. However, that said, I've got some great friends who are collecting autographed vintage cards, and I'm really happy for them. Like, I don't have to collect it too. It saves me a lot of money to spend on other things by not collecting it. Again, it comes down to boundaries and just collecting what you want to collect. Nothing against it. I have an immense amount of respect for it. Brett Miles here says, tears of rarity. My brain exploded. Carvin, back to you. Oh no, I lost that comment when I put that one up. But please address it if you can. Yeah.
So I think there's two aspects of it. Sentimental, but more or less for the person that's acquiring the autograph. Okay, let's say I acquire a manufactured auto versus in person. It's more of an experience. So experience is one factor in, and then the second factor is that what type of player is it? If it's a third line defenseman, I'm much more happy to get it in person of an autograph of that person on a card than actually pulling that card, right? Because when you're pulling a card, that's the value. You rarely see someone get an autographed card from a player and then all of a sudden go, yeah, I hit the jackpot. No one does that, right? So you don't get that rush either, right? When you're pulling a card and you hit a Crosby rookie or a Gretzky autograph, something like that, or a logo man, that's what you want to get. You want to get that rush. You don't get that dopamine rush from in-person autographs. But for experience, like for bringing kids into the hobby and getting to know players and all that, that's the best way. Taking a picture of the player and also getting autographs. So I think it affects two aspects of the hobby. But for me, look, I've met all the GOATs already. I don't need to meet them again. Just getting an autograph card in a pack, that's the rush. Why do we open packs? We want to hit that card. We want to get that rush. So one thing I do want to address is people all talking about not buying packs. So we can talk about that afterwards, but that's something that we should definitely discuss.
Well, maybe we'll do that another time if that's okay. I want to wrap up, and I know that there's still lots of meat on this bone, but that's what we're gonna save it for next time, guys. And we're gonna get all you guys back on here. That's for sure. And Auburn 35 did put this up, Carvin. If you can, opinion, and do this quickly, please. Opinion on the 44 of 99 RPA patch exquisite LeBron lawsuit as issued by Upper Deck or swapped. Can you do this in like a couple of words?
Well, the only thing I can do is really just explain how you can do the research yourself on these type of things. Definitely, I cannot comment on whether it's real or whether it's genuine original patch or not. I'm not talking about the 44 out of 99. I'm just talking about everything else in general, right? It just gets me into a position where I could lose millions of dollars, which I don't own. So, it's just it's not good for me to have an opinion of something that can ruin someone's investment or help someone else out, right? So I think
does that imply that you don't know 100%?
Even if I did know, I would not say it. And I do not know for that. All we can do is backtrack everything and all that, but there are ways of identifying it. That's for people to find out how to identify it, right? I think in my interviews with you and on all the podcasts, I've explained methodology of how to identify, is it possibly a swapped out patch, but there's no guarantees, right? So.
Got it. Okay. Johnny A from Mint Inc. in the house, carving the legend. There you go. Thank you, Mark Santucci. Appreciate it. Okay, guys, we got to wrap up because if for no other reason, then I'm about to pee my pants. So we. I'm sorry. That's why I was rushing you, Carvin. Hey, it's like we're 3.5 hours in here, and I've had 2 glasses of water. So, guys, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining it, and just a special shout out to Josh and Carvin for waiting and coming back on at the end. And I know there's more stuff to talk about, guys. We're gonna do this. We're gonna be back here next. By the way, we're gonna be back here next Saturday, but after that, 2 weeks of no show because I will be at an event one Saturday night, and then which is I think what's that gonna be, the 28th. And then on the 4th, of January, I'm actually be on an airplane. So that's the Saturday then. So we'll be back next Saturday. We already have one guest lined up for sure. And we will fill out the rest of the panel. Joe will most likely be back as always. And guys, I just want to give you all an opportunity to say, goodbye. Any final comments? So let's start with you, Chris. And then we're going to be wrapped up for sure, guys.
Just want to say shout out Justin Bode in the chat. I do love you, buddy, and I love the hobby.
Nice, Chris. Josh Adams.
Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. It's good to see Chris and Joe and Carvin and Brent and Dave from Iowa. That was fun. Happy holidays, and I'm sure I'll talk to you all in the next 15, 20 minutes anyway. So,
and just remind people, 90sauctions.com auction goes live on
tomorrow at noon Eastern, 11 Central, and it goes through January 5th.
There you go, guys. Check out 90sauctions.com. And Carvin, final words to you.
Well, go to Sotheby's and read all about the ideas behind Exquisite collection, and just view the cards. Just pay a visit to the Sotheby's auction and read up and pay attention to the cards. Not asking anyone to bid on it or anything like that, but at least visit the site first and foremost. And everyone, happy holidays. Enjoy the rest of 24, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the new year in 25.
Yeah, guys, Google for Sotheby's and time. Is it capsule or time capsule?
Yeah, I think it's time capsule Exquisite collection. Yeah.
Time capsule Exquisite Sotheby's. Yeah, sports card auction, time capsule, anything like that will get you to that, and you'll read a whole bunch of thought. It's Carvin talking about what he was thinking back at the time and what really inspired Exquisite. I mean, let's face it, it's the most iconic brand in the hobby, I would say. I mean, Topps has an argument. Topps is a brand too, but it has it's Exquisite. Check it out. Joe, let's end with you.
Yeah, just appreciate all the guests tonight, and you, Jeremy, for going through all the questions in the chat and including the community out there and our card family. And yeah, just one quick point that I really take away from this is just how quality content and dialogue like this provokes further thought. So I invite everybody to keep on thinking about your hobby journey.
Well said, man. Well said, guys. You can listen to this show on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Shout out to the chat. Thank you all so much. Great comments. Richie Rocket, I see yours. I saw so many. We couldn't get to them all tonight, guys, but keep on coming back, and we will get to many more than I think really any other streamer does in the space. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And with that, this episode of Sports Cards Live 2.0, December the 14th, 2024, and thank you to all our guests, is now over.